Deep into a mountainous region, a young man is breathing hard as he carries a large pack of supplies on his back. He trudges behind a party of adventurers. One of the men complained that they still couldn't find a rockbird egg. The dark-haired man leading the group grits his teeth, asking why nobles even bothered wanting eggs from magical beasts. Rockbirds were giant, monstrous birds that resemble eagles. Isn't that a griffin then? They were ferocious, with excellent flying and combat abilities, but their numbers were few, making their eggs difficult to find. Before the group found themselves in the mountains, they stood before a man. The man had heard that the Black Thunder Guild would take on any request if someone offered a high enough reward. The man was a noble, and he offered to pay any amount as long as they could bring back a rockbird egg. The guild master of Black Thunder, Hayes, promised to deliver the egg to the noble with a bright smile. However, the young man who was carrying the large pack from before was also there, and he knew that although Hayes said he'd get the egg, finding one was an impossible task. Hayes had accepted the request that would normally be refused by other guilds, blinded by the reward amount. As for why the young man had found himself in such a guild, when he came from the countryside, he had yearned for the royal capital. He begged and pleaded with Hayes as a last resort and was led into that advanced guild, Black Thunder. But he had no talent for swords or magic, so he just kept doing odd jobs. It was the same that time too. He was chosen as a member of the egg search team. He was Yuto Dryg, Black Thunder's odd jobs and baggage handler. As always, he was selected as a baggage carrier during their long hike into the mountains for the egg, despite being already exhausted. Someone suddenly calls out to him, pointing out he was drenched in sweat. Well, yeah, that's one thing that happens when you're hiking in the middle of nowhere. A girl from the party loudly orders that if Yuto ruined the luggage with his sweat, he would be paying for all of it. Yuto apologizes, but he internally curses at the girl. Just because she was with Hayes, she was confident in bossing him around. Yuto starts to question if maybe joining the guild was a mistake in the first place. I wonder how long he's been in the guild only to start questioning that now. Suddenly, one of the party members points to an egg high above a cliff. Hayes looks at it and declares that it's the egg they were looking for. He orders Yuto to be the one to grab it. Yuto tries to argue that the place was quite dangerous for him to climb, but Hayes reasons that if a magical beast appears, he would be the least useful in a fight, so he was the most suitable person right then. He adds, quite unnecessarily, if it would be okay if someone else faced such danger. Yuto begrudgingly relents. He slowly starts scaling the cliffside, terrified. Yuto eventually reaches the egg, however, as he reaches out for it, he notices something odd. Before he could think about it too much, Hayes was already yelling for him to hurry up. He scales down the building and hands over the egg. Hayes swiftly held onto his so-called golden egg and announced to the party that they were celebrating big that night. However, Yuto calls out for their attention, saying that because of the pattern of the shell, he thinks the egg might be a rock lizard, not a rock bird. He tries to convince them to check it again carefully. However, all he gets in response are glares and dirty looks from the rest of the guild. Hayes sighs deeply and calls him a buzzkill. According to him and the rest of the party, it was clearly a rockbird egg no matter how anyone looked at it. Turning his back to Yuto, he declares that since they got the quest item, it was time for them to head back quickly. However, back in the guild hall, the noble exclaims angrily. His experts had just told him that the egg was from a weak magical beast called a rock lizard. That's funny, where have we heard that from? It sounds so familiar. He yells at Hayes, saying that despite calling themselves an advanced guild, they still couldn't tell eggs apart. Hayes bows low, trying to apologize, however the noble continues to yell that he was never requesting work from the Black Thunder Guild again, not even wanting the egg because it was just a weak beast. Calming down, the noble says that he'll report the incident to the Grand Master. Hayes snaps up in attention, panicked, asking the noble not to. His head hurriedly turns around and finds Yuto. Without a second thought, Hayes harshly yanks him over. Hayes forces Yuto to his knees and slams his head to the ground before the noble's feet. He claims that it was all Yuto's fault for insisting it was a rockbird egg. The audacity of this man is beyond explanation. He tells the noble that as guildmaster he thought to give Yuto a chance. Yuto, face pressed to the ground and bleeding, can't understand what he was saying. Hayes promises the noble that he was going to fire Yuto and begs him not to report to the Grand Master. The noble, merciful as he is, supposedly decides to turn a blind eye to the incident just that once, but he swears that he was never requesting from them again. Hayes thanks him and apologizes once more while lifting Yuto's head by his hair and slamming it back down to the ground. Only when the noble leaves does Hayes get up from his kneeling position and let go of Yuto's hair. He sighs in relief that they had avoided the worst possible scenario. Hayes frowns, preferring not to deal with the Baron and his unreasonable requests, although he did regret that he basically worked for free. He curses at the loss. Yuto struggles to get up from his place on the floor. He hesitantly starts talking, saying that Hayes' words from earlier were all lies, but Hayes cuts him off and tells him to shut up. Turning to Yuto, Hayes loudly declares that he would be taking responsibility for the mission failure, and would therefore be dismissed immediately. Yuto immediately exclaims in disbelief. He stands up and argues with Hayes that he was being unreasonable since he's been working for Black Thunder for 2 years. It's crazy that he stuck around for all that for 2 years. Hayes tells him to shut up again, pointing out that there were plenty of replacements for odd job workers like Yuto. He adds that he already promised the Baron earlier that he was going to be fired. Hayes delivers a punch to Yuto's stomach to shut him up. Yuto doubles over from the pain, clutching at his stomach. Hayes orders Yuto to leave the guild dormitories and informs him that he'll be removing the Black Thunder emblem from his license card. Hayes delivers him a final warning, ordering him to never show his face to them again. Yuto tries to say that he warned them about the egg, but they still hadn't listened. Grabbing him by his clothes once more, Hayes argues that he should have tried harder to stop him. Seeing how things are playing out right now, is he sure that he wouldn't have left Yuto for dead up in those mountains if he fought back? Hayes accuses Yuto of knowing that he'd be embarrassed and deliberately let him give the egg to the Baron, so naturally it was all his fault. 2 other guild members lift Yuto by his arms as Hayes orders for him to be thrown out. As Yuto hits the ground outside the guild building, someone chucks the rock lizard egg at him, saying that it was in lieu of his severance pay, and with that, they slam the doors on his face. Yuto sits on the ground, unable to believe all the injustice he just went through. He picks up the egg and speaks to it softly, saying that it had a rough time because of everything too. Thinking it pitiful to just abandon the egg right there, Yuto decides to take care of it for a while. Walking back to the dormitories, a voice welcomes him back with a drawl, calling him Mr. Useless. The more I hear about Yuto's time in the guild, the more I feel bad for him. 2 years of abuse, bro. It was the manager of the dormitories. With a smirk, the manager informs him that he put all his room belongings outside, commenting that he found it easy to move because Yuto didn't have much to begin with. After all, Yuto didn't have much money since he was paying rent he didn't have to. Yuto is confused with his statement. Sneering at him, the manager tells him that the dorms were free for any guild member to live in, but Yuto was the only one paying rent. The manager taunts him by saying that they never thought he was part of the guild, adding with a laugh that he was lucky to have income until they kicked Yuto out. Yuto doesn't have anything to say in reply. Eventually, the day is ending. Trudging down a dirty street, Yuto starts to wonder what he was really doing and why he wanted to go to the royal capital in the first place. He suddenly stops in front of a ragged-looking building, remembering that he needed a place to stay the night. The building was an old inn with a notice outside saying that staying over one night cost 5 copper coins. Seeing it was cheap enough, Yuto decides to settle there for the night. He heads inside and asks for a room. The old man at the counter takes one look at him before going back to his newspaper. He asks for 1 silver coin. Yuto is confused, voicing his thoughts that the sign up front had said 5 copper coins, but the old man cuts him off, saying that if he wanted to complain, he could leave. Yuto, surely the countryside was better than this. This city is awful. Just go home, bro. There's a pause before Yuto relents. Once he gets his room, he closes the door and collapses on the floor by the bed. He lets out a heavy sigh. He was completely spent, not even having the energy to look for another inn. Suddenly, he hears screaming from the other rooms. A voice yells that they were stabbed. Yuto listens as multiple voices start fighting, screams thrown in between. Realizing what was going on, Yuto is terrified as the screams intensify. He forces himself to calm down. Just then, the egg from his bag tilts over because of his shaking and bumps on his knee. He picks up the egg and places it on his lap, hoping that holding it would make him feel a bit better. He runs a gloved hand over the egg's shell. Yuto wonders aloud that the egg seemed different from a rock lizard, too. He couldn't remember the rock lizard egg pattern correctly, so he decides to check on it the next day. He holds the egg closer to himself, comforted by its warmth. Did this guy seriously forget that someone was being murdered in the next room or something? Before he knew it, sunlight was streaming in through the windows. Well, I'll be damned, he really did forget. Did he sleep through the screaming? Yuto blearily opens his eyes, surprised that it was already morning. He suddenly sits up, remembering that he had fallen asleep holding onto the egg. He checks on it immediately if it was okay, hoping he didn't crush it. It suddenly comes to mind that the egg hadn't cracked even a little bit when it was thrown at him back in the guild. Yuto starts to question if the egg wasn't even a rock lizard, but some new species of magical beast. However, he brushes the thought off immediately. Suddenly, a small crack appears on the shell. Yuto places the egg down on the floor, panicking that he really did crush it. However, the egg was moving. More and more cracks start to appear on the wobbling egg. Not before long, a large crack opens, small claws gripping to the outer shell as whatever was inside came out. A small lizard-like creature with tiny wings fully escapes its eggshell. Yuto stares at the creature and it stares back quietly, before throwing its tiny paws into the air with a toothy grin and sounds of greeting. Yuto coos at its cuteness as the newborn monster stands on its legs. It smiles at him once more, repeatedly making small noises. Excitedly wagging its tail, it jumps onto Yuto's lap, much to the man's surprise and embarrassment. Examining the creature, Yuto thinks how although he had initially thought it was a rock lizard, the size seemed to be bigger and more importantly, it had small wings. Maybe it was a subspecies. His thoughts are broken when someone loudly bangs on the door. It was the inn owner, roughly telling him it was checkout time and if he was still there he was getting charged a day extra. Yuto reassures him that he is leaving and the owner leaves him alone with a click of his tongue. The little monster frowns in annoyance at the disturbance. Yuto apologizes to it, especially since it was just born, and asks it to stay in his pack for the meantime. The little creature agrees readily. They go back to town. Yuto walks down the streets carefully holding his bag with his new friend inside in his arms. He starts to wonder what he was going to do from there, especially since the newborn monster seemed to recognize him as its parent from the moment it was born. He thought of raising it, but there was a problem. For an adventurer to walk around with a magical beast, a familiar contract through a guild was essential. And at that moment, Yuto wasn't part of any guild, so he couldn't make the contract. If it was stolen, he couldn't even file a complaint. He decides that he needs to join a guild somewhere. Just then, his bag starts to squirm and the little monster happily pops out with a chirp. How do you describe a little monster who goes coo all the time? Yuto flusteredly asks for it to go back to the bag. But as he passes an alley, two shifty-looking men smirk in his direction. He keeps walking while thinking about what to do next. Joining an advanced guild like Black Thunder was impossible, especially given how he just happened to get in by luck, brother. You begged them to take you in and got abused for 2 years. Nothing about that was luck. Yuto didn't accomplish anything while he was in Black Thunder, however, and so he remained an F rank. He wonders if he could get hired as labor in a mid-tier or weak guild. He continues to think deeply, not even noticing that the creature had poked its head out of his bag again. Yuto only snaps out of his thoughts when he realizes that they had strayed quite far from the main street. Suddenly, two men start coming up behind him. One of them points out that he was holding something nice. Yuto turns around to see two sneering faces looking down at his bag. They go on about how he was holding a rare magical beast that could maybe fetch a good price for being a rock lizard subspecies. They try to persuade him to hand over his bag. Yuto realizes with horror that he was being robbed. He nervously tries to tell them that he couldn't, but the men brush his words off and sarcastically say that they were tight on money and ask him again to hand over the magical beast since he could just find another one. Yuto thinks about his options, knowing that he couldn't just hand over the baby creature to the men. However, if they both attacked him, he wouldn't get away unscathed. The baby creature, oblivious to their situation, gives him a happy smile once more. Yuto tightens his hold on the bag and resolutely says that he couldn't give it away because the child was already his magical beast. The men pause before the broader and taller one of them orders the other one to keep an eye out for people coming. When the other man leaves, the man left with Yuto throws back his arm and delivers a punch right to Yuto's face. He takes it at full force, a large bruise blooming on his face. He remains standing as he clings to the bag. The man orders him to hand over the bag again as he readies to hit him one more time. Yuto grits his teeth. He looks the man dead in the eyes and refuses. The man is pissed with his response and brings out a short knife. He decided to take it by force, brother. You've been forcing yourself to get the baby all this time. What are you talking about? The man lunges for Yuto, knife ready. Yuto squeezes his eyes shut and braces for getting stabbed, but the little creature pops up from his arms and faces the man. Opening its mouth, light starts to form from within. Yuto stares in horror as flames burst from the baby's mouth. Given how close the man was, he takes the fire straight to the face, completely covering his body. Yuto blinks in shock and disbelief at the happy baby monster in his arms. The man is completely fried and drops to the floor out cold. I'm amazed he's not dead considering he took that full force. Yuto yells in disbelief, unable to tell where the fire came from. He turns to the baby and asks it if it was responsible, to which the little monster makes a sound of confirmation. Yuto starts to break down what he knows. Rock lizards didn't breathe fire. With its extraordinary attack power, it was hard to think of it as just some subspecies. He slowly pieces his clues together. Its tough eggshell, the wings on its back, and now its flames. Yuto was sure he had seen it in a book before. It was a magical beast far beyond a rockbird. Yuto stares in horror at the happy little creature in his arms. It was a legendary dragon. Just as Yuto was still barely recovering from his shock that he was holding an actual legendary dragon, the burnt man's accomplice comes immediately back from guarding the entrance to the alley, seeing his ally on the ground. While the man was busy attending to him, Yuto and the dragon slid by ever so slowly, trying not to get any attention and softly reassuring the man that the burnt man was still alive, which is definitely some comfort. He might have been charged with murder. When they're far away enough, Yuto immediately makes a break for it. Streets pass by them, and soon enough they find themselves hiding behind the wall of another building. Yuto waited for a while, making sure that they weren't being chased. I don't think that's possible when the bigger one of them is burnt to a crisp. He holds out the dragon in front of him and praises it for taking the man down in one hit. making the dragon let out a proud chirp. However, their conversation is cut short when the dragon's stomach lets out a loud growl. Remembering that the dragon hadn't had anything to eat since it was born, Yuto starts shifting around the bag and pulls out a dried piece of meat. He offers it to the dragon, who happily takes it. Watching it eat merrily, Yuto thinks how a dragon was a bundle of rarity, so if any more bad guys found out its true identity, it would be in danger far beyond what they had just experienced. Having finished the piece of dried meat, the dragon smiles at him again, absolutely melting at its cuteness. Completely understandable though. Yuto holds the dragon close and resolutely decides to protect the baby dragon. He figured that they might be targeted again, so it would be better for them to stay indoors for the meantime. He looks for a place that might hire even someone like him, and eventually ends up in front of a rather gloomy and shifty-looking building. A sign in front says it was the hall for Quilt's guild. Stealing his nerves, he throws the doors open and gets in. The guild hall was as expected, quests pinned to a board on the wall and tables for guild members to take a break in. Yuto keeps observing the building, glad that it wasn't any different from a normal guild. Suddenly a voice comes from in front of him. A girl at the front desk greets him to Quilt's guild. Her name was Quilt, master of the guild. Yuto walks closer to the counter and Quilt notices that he was injured. Time passes. Quilt had helped patch up his wounds behind the counter. Yuto thanks her, but she brushes off his words, saying that it was the natural thing to do. She's already 1,000 times better than Hayes, I see. She asks for his name, and when he introduces himself, Quilt asks what was troubling him, much to Yuto's surprise. Apparently, Quilt had seen him lurking around the entrance with a serious face. With a little push, Yuto tells her his story about being kicked out of Black Thunder. Quilt ponders out loud how she hadn't heard anything good about Black Thunder and pieces together that he got his injuries from them, or at least most of them. Quilt immediately offers him to join the guild, much to Yuto's surprise. Quilt reassures him that it was no problem. Rather, she asked that he join them, seeing as there was no one else there, and to be quite honest, they were shorthand on members. Yuto admits that he thought that the place was closed. Quilt admits on her end that she wasn't quite good with people and she started the guild herself, but she found being alone quite lonely. Quilt sheepishly admits that going back to the previous guild wasn't an option, so Yuto reassures her that he understood. With that, he agrees to join Quilt's guild. Quilt happily offers to update his license card right away, but Yuto suddenly cuts in, saying that there was one more thing he wanted to talk about, and that it was actually more important. He loosens the tie on his bag and immediately the baby dragon pops its head out of the opening. Quilt immediately coos at the sight of it. The dragon immediately walks across the counter and nuzzles up to her, wagging its tail. She wonders if it's a rock lizard, but she sees that its color was different, and it had wings, and with a start she realizes that the little baby was a dragon. Looking at its features, Quilt was just as sure as Yuto. She asks him where he found it. Petting its chin, Yuto explains that its egg was the reason he got kicked out of Black Thunder. He thought the egg was a rock lizard too, and so they pushed the responsibility on him. Quilt wisely says that those who collected magical beasts and those who sought to make money in the end without love and knowledge, they would miss out on the important things. Quilt is amazed at the realization. She asks him what he wanted to do with the baby dragon, and he immediately says that he intended to make a familiar contract. Quilt explains that although the idea sounds easy, the dragon wasn't just any magical beast. Dragons were rare because they lived in remote areas without human presence. There was no way nobles wouldn't target such a legendary creature. There was also no guarantee that it would grow up to be well-behaved. If a dragon went on a rampage, it would cause massive damage. The baby dragon was both a precious and dangerous creature. Quilt asks him if he would be able to take responsibility should a time come anything happens. Yuto pauses before curling his fists on his lap. He says that ever since he came to the royal capital, he hasn't had any good experiences. He's been treated terribly by various people, however, meeting the baby dragon and coming to Quilt's guild, he suddenly feels it all worth it. And so, Yuto pulls the baby dragon close to his chest and resolutely answers that if it ever harms people, he would absolutely atone for the crime, and to prevent that from ever happening, he would always stay by the baby's side. Quilt smiles at his answer. She agrees with his decision and decides to make the familiar contract right away. Yuto is rather confused with the tension from earlier suddenly disappearing. Quilt winks at him, saying that it was only a test to understand his resolve, but she was reassured when his feelings came through quite clearly. Quilt asks if he's decided on a name. Now that Yuto thought about it, with everything that happened to them, being kicked out of the guild and almost getting his newborn dragon stolen, he never got around to deciding on one. He mumbles to himself as he thinks before he stops. Yuto comes to the decision to call it Rock Bro with all that thinking. That's the best you came up with? Alright then. Rock chirps happily at the sound of its new name. Quilt agrees with the new name. She then asks Yuto to put his right hand on the desk and for Rock to put its left front leg on top of Yuto's hand. Quilt puts her hand over theirs and a light starts to glow from her touch. When it eventually fades, Yuto looks at the back of his hand to find a glowing emblem. The contract was complete, and with that, Yuto and Rock were officially partners. Quilt then asks him if he wanted to get his first quest. Excitedly, Yuto says that he'll do anything, even any tough job. Quilt warns him teasingly that he shouldn't say he would do anything, or he really might be ordered to do anything. Sis, what is that supposed to imply? I'm kinda scared. Yuto nervously promises to be more careful in the future. Turning back the conversation back to the main topic, Quilt assigns jackalope horns for Yuto's first quest. Jackalopes were also known as horned rabbits. Yuto's task was to defeat 5 jackalopes and to deliver 10 horns. The best hunting ground was Furoshuku Forest, which wasn't far off from the royal capital. Yuto excitedly tells Rock that they were going to do their best. In a rush, Quilt throws multiple gear Yuto's way. She hands him a map to the destination and a simpler map of the forest interior. She also adds a memo with important points to note and a backpack. And finally, a gift from her. Quilt pushes a sword towards him. Yuto holds it in his hands, both nervous but also excited at the sight of it. Quilt explains that an adventurer should have at least one weapon. It wasn't a special sword, but it was a fairly good quality one. Yuto is amazed that he was provided a sword too, given that he didn't remember ever getting anything similar during his time from Black Thunder. Bro, the only thing you could have gotten from that place was trauma and a possible concussion at the least. Yuto wonders to himself if that was what a normal guild felt like. Quilt apologizes to him that she could only prepare a longsword for him. Gradually, she promises that they would get him armor as well. I find it quite interesting that guilds in this world provided the adventurers with their gear. Usually, the adventurer should have their own. Quilt explains that this time around, since it was only meant to test his abilities, there was no penalty even if he failed. All that mattered was that both Yuto and Rock came back safe. Yuto promises that they'll come back in one piece. Yuto readies himself for the trip, a cloak over his shoulders and his new sword strapped to his waist. Yuto asks Rock to get in the backpack since it would be trouble if thieves set their eyes on it again. He asks for it to bear with it until they reach the forest. With that, Yuto and Rock bid Quilt goodbye. As the doors shut behind them, a silence comes over the guild hall as Quilt is left alone behind the front desk. In the next second, Quilt collapses on the counter with a heavy exhale, completely exhausted. She pouts, saying that playing the cool big sister role wasn't easy. Personally, I think you did a splendid job either way. She rolls around, voicing aloud how nervous she was. She ponders when was the last time she talked to someone that much, but she was very glad that she was able to muster up her once-in-a-lifetime courage. Quilt didn't have anything else to give, so she gave him her spare sword. Although she wondered if it was all right, she reasons that to ordinary people, it would be an ordinary sword. Why do I feel like that's implying a little something more? What if the person isn't ordinary, Quilt? Completely spent, Quilt decides on going to sleep, still sprawled on the front desk. Meanwhile, in the Black Thunder meeting room, Hayes had gathered his members. He reminds everyone that they had managed to anger Baron MacGuffin Zool, the one who requested a rockbird egg, but Black Thunder had mistakenly given him a rock lizard egg. Hayes says that it was all Yuto's fault. This guy seriously gaslit himself into believing it was all Yuto's fault. That it's almost insane. Hayes continues that he fired Yuto immediately, but that alone wouldn't restore their honor. He admits that he didn't like the Baron, but they needed to do something about their bad reputation. One of the members suggests that they need to find the egg and redeem themselves, but Hayes says that they'll also execute another plan at the same time. With a crazed look on his face, he declares that they would ambush and steal eggs found by other guilds. That way they could take it easy and others wouldn't be able to get the credit. This guy has completely lost his marbles. The other members are amazed at his thinking, which, to be honest, explains where Hayes gets all his pride from. Hayes orders his men to keep their eyes on other guilds because surely the Baron would make the request from other guilds as well. He tells them to report to him as soon as they find anything. Besides gaining information about that, the guild members are told to return to their regular duties and the meeting is over. However, seated in on the meeting, Hayes' girlfriend remains oddly quiet. Time passes and Yuto and Rock find themselves in the forest, the young man busy looking over the map Quilt had given him. Declaring that the area would be safe enough, Yuto lowers his backpack and allows Rock to come out. The little dragon runs out excitedly. Yuto calls out for it to not stray too far away from him, to which Rock lets out a chirp of agreement. But soon after, its little foot trips over a small jutting rock, quite funnily enough, and Rock is sent tumbling away, much to Yuto's panic. Rock hits the foot of a tree roughly and Yuto runs after him. He's about to ask if he was okay, but when he arrives, Rock greets him with a happy chirp. Yuto is reassured that Rock is fine, but the tree definitely was not. Yuto is amazed at a dragon's physical abilities, but his thoughts are cut short when he hears rustling close by. When he leans over, he finds a small furry creature with almost deer-like horns. It was a jackalope. Yuto gets up and readies his sword to get his first jackalope, but before he can do anything, Rock is lunging for it. The jackalope leaps out of the bushes ready for a fight, but Rock is faster and delivers a headbutt so powerful that it shatters the jackalope's horns. The horned rabbit falls to the ground, lifeless, and Rock chirps in victory. Yuto is shocked that Rock had taken the jackalope down in a single hit. He pets Rock's head and praises him for being amazing, making the little dragon pleased. Yuto couldn't believe that a single headbutt had that much power. Even though Rock had just been born, its body was already really tough. Kneeling down, Yuto asks if it was possible for Rock to aim at the body next time, to which Rock chirps in understanding. In another clump of bushes, they spot another furry creature with tall horns. Yuto points to the jackalope and tells Rock to aim for it. Rock lunges once more and the jackalope raises its head in alarm. The jackalope gets ready for Rock's attack, but after gathering some strength in its legs, Rock propels itself forward and flips into the air. Yuto watches it, mesmerized. When Rock is close enough, it flips and lands a powerful hit on the jackalope with its tail. Tiny baby dragon just tail slapped the life out of a rabbit. The jackalope lies dead, and Rock lands gracefully standing up. Yuto is completely amazed. He showers Rock with praises, much to Rock's enjoyment. Yuto excitedly pushes for them to take down more of the horned rabbits. Time passes, and pretty soon a few more horned rabbits are dead on the forest floor. Yuto counts all 5 of them, completing the quest requirements. Suddenly, Yuto notices that Rock was acting out of sorts, making sad chirps again and again. Yuto begins to immediately panic, asking the baby dragon if it had gotten injured. His questions are stopped at the sound of a very loud growl coming from Rock's stomach. "Bro, this is like the second time you've forgotten to feed the baby." Realizing that it was only just tired, Yuto apologizes for only noticing it then. He knows that, but it wasn't like he had much food left to feed it. He suddenly remembers the jackalopes. He wonders if they were edible. Although most magical beast meats weren't suited for human tastes, if it was a dragon, maybe things would be different. Yuto turns to Rock and asks if it wants to try and eat the rabbits. Opening its mouth, Rock delivers fierce flames into the pile of jackalope bodies. When the flames clear, it digs into its new meal, tail wagging in satisfaction. Yuto comments that it was eating with so much gusto. Sitting on a nearby rock, he decides to take a small break too. While Yuto jokes for Rock to not rush so much since no one was going to take its meal away, a shadowy figure appears from behind him, deep behind the forest foliage. A wolf-like monster slowly creeps closer to where Yuto was, who remained completely oblivious to the coming danger. Finally sensing the beast's presence, Rock chirps in alarm and readies itself for battle. Yuto immediately gets up at its aggression and he turns around to see the monster, which turned out to be a black wolf. Yuto questions why such a dangerous magical beast was in the forest. He's about to call to Rock for help, but Yuto suddenly remembers that the wolf was able to inflict curses with its claws and fangs. If they were attacked right then, Yuto wasn't sure how it would affect Rock. He curses, realizing that he had to fight alone. Yuto raises his sword, readying himself for battle. All of a sudden, the sword starts to emit a faint light. Yuto is so distracted by the glowing sword that he fails to notice the wolf advancing. The wolf lunges for him, and in his panic, Yuto stumbles back and falls to the ground. As a last-ditch effort, he swings his sword wildly. His slash turns the air into a solid blast of light. As it hits the wolf mid-jump, it completely slashes it clean in two. One strike and it was done. I don't know what I was thinking, but that wolf is terrifyingly huge. The wolf, now in 2 pieces, falls flat on the ground in front of where Yuto collapsed. Immediately, the black wolf is stripped of its fur and meat, and only its bones remain. Yuto sits there for a pause before he makes a dumbfounded sound in his confusion. He looks at his sword and with another pause, decides to sheath it for the moment. Quilt had said it wasn't anything special, but it was a sword that could shoot slashes. Quilt, you absolute liar, OMG. His thoughts are disturbed at Rock's chirps. The baby dragon excitedly waves its arms at him. Yuto squats down and pets its head, glad that it wasn't hurt. The sword had truly saved them. Yuto decided that they needed to get ready to head back. Their iron rule was to return immediately after finishing the job. It really should be your iron rule considering how trouble just seemed to find you all the time. But before they could leave, Yuto turns to the black wolf's bones and decides that they needed to collect that too. He kneels down and finds a magic stone among the bones. Magic stones were formed inside magical beasts. By having them examined at the guild or other specific places, an adventurer could prove they defeated the beast. Oh, that's super cool. It's like a little memory crystal, except it records the moment of death, lol. With fangs, claws, magic stone in his backpack, not to mention the jackalope horns, it was already full and impossible to put Rock inside. Not having any other choice, he decides to wrap Rock in his cloak and carry him. Yuto asks Rock to be quiet on the carriage ride back. Time passes and they arrive in a small village. Yuto waits patiently by a tree with Rock. In the distance, he sees a horse-drawn carriage heading their way. However, he suddenly stops short when he notices that the adventurers guarding the carriage were from Black Thunder. Yuto sneaks by his ex-guildmates without being noticed to get to the carriage entrance. Thankfully enough, he's able to secure a seat. Suddenly, a little girl beside him asks if the creature in his arms was a lizard, surprising Yuto. Looking down, he finds that the cloak had loosened and Rock's head was poking out. The little girl exclaims that she thought the little creature was cute, and Yuto scrambles to explain that Rock was a lizard and his partner. He adds that she shouldn't worry because Rock didn't bite. The girl reaches over and tries to grab Rock's paws. As she pulls at him, the cloak falls even more and reveals its wings. The girl exclaims at the sight, but before anyone could hear her, Yuto loudly exclaims that Rock was a rare and unusual type of lizard, much to Rock's annoyance. Suddenly, the girl's mother reprimands her and tells her to be quiet. The mother turns to Yuto and apologizes for her daughter since she had fallen asleep and failed to notice that her daughter was disturbing him. Yuto reassures her that it was fine, just internally grateful that their cover wasn't blown yet. Yuto turns to Rock and apologizes for calling it a lizard, giving it pats to the head. Their carriage eventually stops somewhere as the horses took a break. Rock is bundled up in the cloak, fast asleep. Yuto wonders if he should get some sleep too. Just then, outside the carriage, one of the Black Thunder Guards turns to the forest as birds fly away and the trees shake. The horses on the carriage begin to whinny in panic, unsettled by something the coachman couldn't see. Suddenly, a large figure towering over the forest trees exits and corners the carriage. With a ferocious roar, a large man-like monster holding a gigantic club appears before them. The Black Thunder Guards at the top of the carriage scurry in fear at the sight of the giant troll. They question how a nearly B-rank monster was doing on their route. The passengers in the carriage panic at the sight of the monster. Yuto turns to Rock to find the dragon already awake. The Black Thunder members guarding their carriage were only D-rank, so there was no way just the three of them could defeat it. However, Yuto thinks that maybe if he and Rock worked together with them, they'd stand a chance, brother. You really snuck behind them earlier, and your main goal is to hide Rock from them. Why are you putting yourself out there for the world to see? Preparing themselves for a fight, Yuto and Rock exit the carriage. Yuto tries to talk to the members about taking down the giant troll, but before he can even near them, screams erupt. A sword cuts the horses free from the carriage. The Black Thunder members get on the horses and run away, screaming that they weren't able to fight such a monster. The coachman begs for them to return the horses, but they gallop away. Yuto stares in horror as the adventurers completely deserted them in the face of an enemy. The coachman collapses to the floor, convinced they were all going to die. But Yuto implores him to get up and return to the carriage due to how dangerous it was being outside. With the guards gone, the passengers are all terrified. Yuto puts a hand over his sword. The giant troll is hit on the head by a small pebble. When it looks down, its eyes land on Yuto and Rock. Yuto tosses a pebble into the air before mocking the monster. Almost immediately, the troll runs after him. Yuto successfully leads it away from the carriage full of passengers. Turning around to face their incoming enemy, Yuto initially relies on Rock. Rock immediately opens its mouth and breathes a blaze of flames right at the approaching troll. Yuto waits for the flames to clear, wondering if that was enough to do it in. Rock's power was on a whole different level compared to before. It was most likely its full firepower at the moment. The troll is silent for a pause, its body completely burnt. And in the second, it swings its bat wildly at Rock and Yuto. The two are able to dodge the attacks just in time. Yuto curses, realizing the monster took less damage than he thought. Its speed was also faster than expected. Rock could dodge the attacks easily, but Yuto was more vulnerable. Just one hit would be able to do major damage to him. He wonders if he'll be able to do it with the sword in his hands. He's shaking, but he forces himself not to be afraid. If he hesitated even a little bit, the passengers in the carriage would all be attacked. If he stopped there, then might never be able to again. He rushes in towards the troll. He slashes at the air. Like before, the air solidifies and strikes at the troll's knee. However, when the dust clears, all that's there is a gash across its knee. Yuto is horrified at the realization that its skin was hard, and his attack only scratched the surface. Before he could react, the club is swung and it hits him square in the side of his body. Yuto could barely react beyond a gasp of surprise before he's sent flying straight to the ground. He finds himself lying flat on the ground, Rock making panicked chirps beside him. All that was running in his head was the pain of his body, his thoughts a tangled mess. His left arm had gone numb and he couldn't move his body. As the giant troll slowly advanced towards him, he wondered if he was going to die right then and there. He was already mourning how he had just been given the opportunity to move forward as an adventurer. Suddenly, from the carriage, the little girl breathes in and she shouts with all her might for Yuto to not give up. Yuto slowly sobers up. More and more voices chime in from the carriage, trying to encourage him to keep going. From beside him, Rock continued to chirp out to him. Yuto's hand encloses around the sword's hilt, and using the blade, he pushes himself to stand back up, resolute that he couldn't fall there. With a terrifying glare, he promises to kill the giant troll. He rushes back into the fight just as he does so. Rock opens its mouth and softly roars. Unknown to Yuto, the emblem on the back of his hand that held his familiar contract glowed. He jumps into the air, sword blazing with light. He slashes and it solidifies once more, much more powerfully than before. The slash hits and, like the wolf, completely cuts the giant troll clean in two. The troll makes one last groan before its body hits the ground and begins to disintegrate. Yuto stands victoriously over its remains as Rock continues to chirp happily in their win beside him. Back in Black Thunder's guild, the D-rank member guards of the carriage burst into a room where Haze was. Haze is pissed at the sudden noise, but he notices that they were the ones who were supposed to be guarding a passenger carriage. He immediately confronts them on why they were already there and what happened to the escort mission. One of the men stumbles through his words. He nervously explains to Haze that they were attacked by a giant troll and they barely managed to escape. Yep, using the carriage horses too. This guild is just filled with cowards, I see. The other guild members listening in are shocked. Haze clicks his tongue, annoyed at the sudden problem. He barks out orders to members C rank and above to come with him, saying that they were cleaning everything up before other guilds catch wind of the problem. Timidly, one of the carriage guards asks if they should go back with them, which only pisses Haze off more. Haze then orders the remaining members in the guild hall to restrain the carriage guards. According to him, they had seriously violated protocol and were expecting to lose their heads over it. I'm just going to hope it's not the literal sense. But you don't always know with Haze. The guards argue with him and ask if they should have stayed behind and died with the passengers. Haze looks down at them, pointing out that if they hadn't fled and just died in the line of duty, the Black Thunder Guild could have minimized the scandal. But they just had to come crawling back. Haze asks them sarcastically if they truly expected that there would be any mercy for anyone who tarnished their guild's reputation. The carriage guards, and I suppose now ex-guild members of Black Thunder, fall to their knees at a loss for a proper response. A member comes in and informs Haze that their preparations were complete. Haze orders that they were moving along the highway and searching for both the carriage and the giant troll. Since they were both quite large, they shouldn't be able to miss them. Haze smirks darkly. Given their panic, it was possible that other guilds already knew how the Black Thunder members fled. Haze needed to clean the problem up thoroughly. A crowd is gathered at the city gate. As Haze had thought, other guilds had already caught on. But when his horse gallops closer to the entrance, he notices that everyone was just standing by the gateway. The crowd watches as a large carriage was hurriedly headed towards them at an incredible speed. It was Yuto's passenger carriage, and at the front, dragging the whole carriage along with it, was Rock, screaming in glee. Rock stops the carriage in time, right in front of the crowd gathered in front of the gate. The coachman and Yuto, who were sitting in front, breathed out a sigh of relief as they were able to make it back to the city. Yuto is amazed that Rock could pull that much weight. Back when they were still in the forest and Yuto was just realizing his victory over the giant troll, a stab of pain overtook his body. He screams with the pain of all his injuries, more so his arm. Managing to calm down somewhat, he starts to think of how, although they somehow managed to escape death, there was still a possibility more monsters might attack. It would be dangerous for them to just wait there for help. Just as he's thinking of a solution, Rock keeps chirping, trying to catch his attention. When he finally turns to it, Rock motions to the carriage. Yuto asks if Rock wanted to try and pull the carriage itself. He thinks of their options and the uncertainty of when help would arrive if they continued to stay there. Finally, he agrees and asks Rock if it could give it a try. The coachman and Yuto, arm now in a sling, sit at the front. Yuto takes hold of Rock's new reins as it gets ready to pull the carriage. Bracing its legs, Rock rushes forward with all of them in tow. Once they arrive back in the city, Yuto goes over to Rock and pats it on the head. He thanks it for helping them make it back to the city using its cleverness and strength. The coachman is almost in disbelief that they were able to make it back. He gets off the carriage and grabs Yuto by the shoulders, thanking him over and over before the coachman asks for his name. Yuto tells him that he was being a bit dramatic, but the coachman argues back that it was only right to know who he was since he saved them from certain death. Finally, Yuto introduces himself and Rock. The coachman thanks them again. Suddenly, the little girl pops up and offers a loaf of bread to Rock, who she lovingly calls Mr. Lizard. Yuto asks if she was sure, and she tells him that it was thank you for defeating the troll. The other passengers came forward as well, and before long, Yuto and Rock had a whole basket of food all to themselves. Just then, the coachman calls for his attention again. He informs him that he was going to file a complaint against Black Thunder for their breach of contract. He asks if Yuto was going to join them. Yuto agrees, although he admits that he would rather not see them, but his voice slowly fades away when he turns to his side. He suddenly says that it was no longer necessary, much to the coachman's surprise. With a rather loud voice, Yuto declares that Black Thunder was right there with them. He specifically points out their guildmaster, who was right there in the crowd. All eyes turn to look at Haze. Haze's expression is dark with barely suppressed anger. He clenches his fists and remains quiet before bowing lowly to the coachman, the guild members with him following suit. He apologizes for the trouble his guild members caused them and offers his apologies as the guild master. The coachman explodes in anger, refusing to accept his apology, especially since they almost died. He points out that they had hired 3 D-rank members, and all of them abandoned the carriage. He adds that the guild should return the horses the members stole. Hayes apologizes again before quickly ordering one of his men to bring back the horses. He bows before the coachman again and says that the 3 guards weren't properly trained members of the guild. He promises to immediately dismiss them, and that the guild would make sure it would never happen again. Damn. Now where have I heard that promise before? Sounds really familiar. The coachman continues that compared to the members of Black Thunder, Yuto and Rock were truly brave for defeating the giant troll. His words make Hayes pause. His head immediately whips around to Yuto, who was standing nearby. He repeats the coachman's words, almost unable to believe what Yuto had done. His mouth breaks into a smirk as he loudly proclaims that Black Thunder's Yuto Dryg just pulled off an incredible achievement. The audacity is truly a marvel to behold. The coachman is surprised to hear that Yuto is a part of Black Thunder, but Hayes continues that Yuto was a man with a strong sense of justice, so strong he even works on his days off. Hayes adds that he was the pride of their guild. Yuto watches on in shock as Hayes goes on about their guild, but Yuto very much remembered that he was fired the day before. Hayes was obviously trying to avoid lowering his guild's reputation. Hayes tells the coachman that Yuto was extremely capable and had been a great help to them. Not to mention he was an important member of the guild. He looks to Yuto for support on his story. Yuto finally speaks up and says that he truly was a member of Black Thunder until recently. Hayes flinches as the coachman asks for Yuto to elaborate. Yuto explains that Hayes had pushed all the responsibility to him when he failed the mission from the Baron. In the end, Yuto ended up getting fired. Hayes flinches back, realizing he was caught. Yuto continues, saying that it seemed like Hayes was trying to cover up the incident and pretend it never happened. However, Yuto informs them that he was already a member of a different guild. He holds out his adventurer's license card. Showing it up to them, Yuto says that he was already part of a respectable guild called Quilt's Guild. Quilt, your new hire is doing amazing work marketing your guild. I'm so proud of you guys. Hayes hears the murmurs of the other guilds behind him as they whisper how Yuto was just fired, and Black Thunder basically ran away. Trying to salvage their reputation still, Hayes reasons that at the time it was their only way to contain the situation. He tells Yuto that he still thought of him as a comrade. Hayes asks him to consider coming back. Yuto tells him that he was in Black Thunder for 2 whole years, but it was only after joining another guild that he realized he was just being used under the guise of training. Bro, hold on a minute, they told him he was under training, doing chores for 2 whole years? His time there keeps getting worse. Yuto says that he was basically a disposable pawn to be discarded when things got tough. Yuto adds that he didn't intend to debate the legitimacy of his dismissal there and just wanted to testify that Hayes was a man who easily lies to avoid responsibility. Hayes tries his best to keep his emotions in check. Suddenly, Yuto calls for Hayes' attention once more and all but orders him to report the failure to the Grand Master himself. Hayes tries to argue back immediately. Yuto cuts him off, stating that it was fortunate that there were no casualties in the incident. Gotta love that he glosses over the fact he almost died for a few seconds there. The guild wouldn't be disbanded immediately, so Yuto asks him why he was hesitating unless he had something else he was hiding. Voice shaking, Hayes steels himself before stating clearer that it was nothing like that. Yuto repeats his request for Hayes to report it to the Grand Master, which is almost an order, not gonna lie. Hayes agrees through gritted teeth. If Yuto continued to push him any further, there was no telling what Hayes might do. Yuto decides to stop there. Brushing all the tension off, Yuto announces that compensation would be arranged and tells everyone to wrap it up. The coachman bows to Yuto again, thanking him once more, but Yuto reassures him that he did it for his own sake as well. The crowd disperses. Seeing as all the commotion was over, however, some figures seem to linger and watch. Yuto had realized that some people have realized that Rock wasn't just any ordinary magical beast. He resolves to be more careful. Yuto thinks that Hayes must also have made some predictions about Rock's true identity, and so he had to keep an eye on his movements. Yuto finishes off his request from Hayes on what to report to the Grand Master, adding that Quilt's guild would be collecting the reward for the giant troll. Get that money, Quilt. Hayes replies curtly to his words. With that, Yuto and Rock head out to grab their backpack. As the members of Black Thunder hesitantly come towards the guildmaster, Hayes delivers a dark and deadly glare to Yuto's retreating back. Internally, Yuto thinks about how the old him wouldn't have been able to do something so bold. He never really knew what life had in store. Yuto tells Rock that they were going back to their guild, Rock happily agreeing as it holds up their basket of gifts. Yuto follows with a smile as Rock leads their way back to the guild, parading around their basket of food. As they near the doors to the guild hall, Yuto praises Rock for remembering their way back. They enter the building and announce their arrival. As Yuto enters deeper and heads to the front desk, he sees locks of hair hanging down. He finds himself panicking at the sight of Quilt, passed out over the counter. Because of his shouting, Quilt starts to blearily wake up. Fully opening her eyes, she spots Yuto in front of her and stands up in a rush, asking what happened. Yuto counters that he should be the one asking what on earth happened to her. Quilt awkwardly laughs, admitting that she just dozed off a little. Realizing what she said, she clarifies that she didn't usually sleep in places like that. She defends herself that she wasn't normally that lazy. Quickly changing topics, Quilt directs the conversation to his quest. But just as quickly, she notices his arm that was on a sling, seemingly worse off than when she had sent him on his way to his first adventure. Dragging him by the arm, Quilt urges them to treat his injuries as soon as possible. Time passes as they find themselves behind the front desk again, and Quilt helps Yuto. She's amazed at the realization that she had just healed him in almost the same day. Can't believe everything that Yuto's been through has been the span of 2 days at most. Yuto apologizes for the trouble. Quilt reassures him that it was all right. However, she still couldn't quite believe everything that happened to him. From what she knew, black wolves and giant trolls usually didn't appear very frequently. There was a possibility that a stronger magical beast appeared and drove them out of their home, most likely a stronger magical beast than the troll. Yuto's face darkens in horror at the thought of it. Quilt reassures him that it was all just speculation, but it wouldn't hurt for him to stay careful. Quilt praises his amazing ability to defeat the two monsters. She's heard that he almost had no combat experience to speak of, but normal people would have ran off. Quilt praises him some more, which Yuto tries to refuse. Yuto suddenly remembers the sword and Quilt assumes he had a hard time using it. He explains that it was rather the opposite. Whenever he used it, it would glow and shoot out solid slashes at the enemy. Yuto was sure that Quilt knew something about it. Quilt is amazed to hear that Yuto was able to draw out the sword's power, which makes Yuto question its origins even more. Quilt laughs, saying that of course she knew what the sword was since she had one of her own. Yuto marvels at Quilt's sword as she puts it on the desk. It was similar in design as the one Yuto received. Quilt tells him that the one he used was a spare that was hardly used. Meanwhile, she picks up her own sword, and when she raises a hand to the blade, Yuto notes that the pattern was different from his. Yuto is about to ask Quilt again the power of the swords when she point-blank tells him that she didn't know either, unable to understand the principle behind it. But if there was one thing she could tell him, it was that the swords were made from a dragon's fang. Both Yuto and Rock are shocked at the revelation. Kinda wild to find out that the sword you're carrying could most likely be a relative of your magical creature partner. Quilt confirms that the twin swords were forged from the single fang of a dragon. In a panic, Quilt clarifies that they hadn't killed the dragon to get the tooth. If anything, she had almost died during the fight. Back then, as a youth, she had felt like she would be able to win against anything. She laughs at the memory of how after breaking off the fang, the dragon ended up kicking their asses, quite surprised that you're not dead yet, Quilt. Yuto asks her in disbelief why she had handed him such an amazing item. Awkwardly, Quilt reasons that it was the only one she had on hand. She didn't want him to leave empty-handed, but also couldn't reveal that she had nothing to give. Finally, she couldn't take it, and she admits that she gave it away to save face. Yuto couldn't believe that she gave away such a sword just to save face. Quilt reassures him that she wasn't trying to fool or surprise him in any way since the sword was an ordinary and sturdy sword to ordinary people. She tells him that the sword only shows its true power as a response to the wielder's strength. It meant that the sword had recognized Yuto as its owner. He has two dragons recognizing him now. Quilt explains that it would be like the sword reacting to all his experiences thus far. Yuto hopes that that was the case. Suddenly remembering something, Quilt gets up and opens a drawer. She produces a small pouch filled with gold coins from the desk. It was his reward for the quest, but Yuto is surprised at such a large amount. He says that he appreciates the thought, but he worries that it was a bit too much and might be a breach of guild regulations. Quilt argues that it was just the right amount, including his bonus for being promoted into D rank. Yuto was shocked that he was already in D rank. Quilt reminds him that he took down a giant troll, so it was only right for his combat level. She asks him if he was paid back when he was still in Black Thunder, and Yuto reassures her that he was. It was just that he was paid enough to get by through the month. Quilt tells him that he should still have been paid fairly even if he was only a baggage carrier, especially if he was hardworking. Seeing how surprised he was just by that amount, it was obvious to her that he's been unfairly underpaid until then. The people running Black Thunder truly needed to learn a lesson, Hayes. I swear you're going to catch these hands. Yuto is speechless, so Quilt goes on to say that the reward and the D-rank promotion were only natural. She tells him to hold his head up high as she offers the pouch of gold back to him. There's a pause and then a sniffle. Quilt bursts into panic as Yuto starts to cry. She asks him if her face was too scary because she often heard that her angry face makes people want to cry. Instead, Yuto reassures her that he was only crying because he was happy. This man deserves a year-long break, OMG. Ever since he had come to the royal capital, he's never been treated well. He didn't realize how much he was pushing himself unconsciously. Suddenly, Quilt lunges for him and traps him into a hug. Rock following not too long. Quilt and Rock hold on to Yuto. She promises that he never has to suffer like that anymore, and she would absolutely not let him push himself like that again. Yuto is flustered at their closeness but thanks Quilt nonetheless. When she pulls away, Yuto thanks Rock for its comfort as well. With things settled, Quilt declares that the rest be left up to her and she tells him to rest for a while to heal his injuries. Yuto immediately negatively reacts to the idea of not working and just resting. He tries to say that he can still work, but suddenly Quilt comes closer to him with a dark and terrifying smile. She reminds him that she just swore that she would not let him do that. She reminds him that their first priority was to heal his injuries. Yuto meekly relents. Quilt asks him if he had a place to stay, and he mentions that when he was fired, he also got kicked out of the dorms. Quilt tells him to just live there in the guild hall instead. There were plenty of empty rooms, and as he could see, there was really no one to fight him for it, so his choices were endless. He asks how much the rent would be, and Quilt of course says that it was for free since he was a member of the guild. He was working there, so there was definitely no need for it at all. Hearing that, Yuto gratefully accepts the offer. As he climbs up the stairs for the second floor, Quilt calls out to him to say that he was staying in room number 1. It was already furnished to some extent and was just recently cleaned. Having reached his new room, Yuto enters. His eyes glitter at the sight of the spacious room all for him and without needing to pay anything. Suddenly, Yuto hears Rock's chirps. He turns to find it messing with the shutters of the window. When they both looked out, they found themselves having quite a view of the street from there. Yuto flops down on the bed out of exhaustion. Rock comes up to his side and Yuto offers for them to sleep together. Rock immediately curls up beside him. Yuto's eyes are heavy from the long day. A lot had happened, but Yuto was grateful for having ended up where he was. Meanwhile, in Black Thunder, a fist slams roughly into a table. Hayes starts the meeting by saying that it truly was an unfortunate day that they had to hold 2 emergency meetings on the same day. Personally, I am relishing his annoyance. His whole face tenses more as he glares, asking his members if they knew the topic for their meeting. The Black Thunder Guild members stay quiet in their fear. Hayes continues to say that because of their 3 guild members, whose names he'd already forgotten. Black Thunder was sworn to report to the Grand Master, not to mention in public. Hayes grits his teeth, wanting to curse at Yuto, but he calms himself enough to put him aside so they could focus on their main problem. They couldn't avoid reporting to the Grand Master. Hayes informs them that he'd already taken care of the report before the meeting, making the members breathe out in relief. But almost immediately they tense up again as Hayes tells them it's too early to relax. Desertion in the face of the enemy was a serious violation of discipline. At that rate, an auditor was sure to be sent from the Grand Guild. If they were inspected in their current state, their guild's already poor reputation would surely plummet. Even if they avoided dissolution, it was still possible for Black Thunder's advanced certification to be revoked. Hayes orders everyone to dispose of anything unfavorable before the auditor arrives. They weren't to try and put on a good face unnecessarily, or they'll be seen through immediately. Hayes tells them to get through the week as plainly and uneventfully as possible, to which the members swear to with a salute. Hayes shouts for them to also keep the guild clean because it's been so dirty. He asks who is in charge of cleaning. Timidly, one of the members raises a hand and says that Yuto always used to do cleaning and managing supplies, so no one has been doing it. The answer angers Hayes as he asks if they were trying to say that it couldn't be helped just because Yuto was gone. The member shrinks back in fear of him. Besides that, he reinstates that it was their time to lay low. They only had to endure it for a week, and after that, they could return to their usual guild operations. He adds for them to not let their guard down too much. With a final warning and wearing a sinister smile, he reminds them what would happen if they lose their advanced certification because of any of their actions. They salute again, although nervously, and Hayes adjourns the meeting and tells them to start cleaning. Hayes exits the meeting room and another voice comes up from behind him, asking when he was going to take them on their next adventure. It was Hayes' girlfriend, Shul. Arms crossed, she pointedly says she only joined Black Thunder because he said that she'd see rare magical beasts. Hayes apologizes to her, but he reasons that the guild's survival was at stake at that moment, and he asks her to be patient for a while. With a frown, Shul says that she would just go on an adventure with someone else instead of him. Hayes jokes that she was openly cheating on him, to which Shul immediately gets angry at since she was only suggesting an alternative since he said he couldn't come along. Hayes laughs, asking her not to get so angry. Internally, he thinks that if he didn't find her so good-looking, he would have hit her. Excuse me? What? In Hayes' perspective, Shul's brains and magical skills were below average, but her looks were really something. I hate hearing about other people from this guy's head. From what Hayes had seen, she was beautiful enough to turn heads in the royal capital, regardless of gender. She was rather selfish, but Hayes thought that just having her on his arm was valuable. Hayes brings up that a member named El Rocco should be going on a regular survey to the Altatum ruins, and he offers for Shul to join him. It was a place filled with ancient artifacts. There were things just lying around that current experts couldn't even comprehend. To top it all off, Hayes tells Shul that the magical beasts living there have also evolved uniquely. The words seem to catch Shul in a trance, and with almost no hesitation she agrees to join the expedition. She turns back around, announcing that she was going back to the dorms, and Hayes bids her goodnight. Hayes holds the smile on his face for a second more before it drops into his usual frown. He mutters that if he didn't find her angry face so cute as well, he would have hit her. Excuse me? What? Hayes eventually brushes the idea off because to him he could just train her little by little. Both her and the future of the Black Thunder Guild. This man genuinely needs an intervention. Whether psychological or divine, it doesn't matter. He needs to be stopped. Time passes, and Yuto and Rock start the day off by doing some stretching. As he stretches his left arm, Yuto is amazed that the injuries from the giant troll were completely healed using healing magic. He never expected Quilt to bring a healer, better yet, it was essentially free, the cost covered by the guild. However, Quilt made sure to kindly threaten him that if he was thinking of getting back to work right away because he was healed, she wasn't letting him. She pushes for him to rest for a while, and Yuto nervously agrees. As Yuto and Rock descend the stairs to the main guild hall, Quilt greets him a good morning and asks how he was feeling. Yuto says that thanks to her, he was back to being full of energy. Quilt admits that she felt bad for telling him to rest, but she asks him if he could go to town for a bit. Apparently, Quilt wanted to get him a full set of armor before his next adventure. Oh hell yeah, brother is getting suited up. Yuto is surprised and tries to say that he already received some and that he didn't have the budget to cover the costs for a new set. But Quilt slams her hands on the table and tells him that the ones he had were just temporary and that they needed to properly prepare armor that suited him. Custom-made armor took time, so she wanted to get him measured early. She adds that he shouldn't worry about the money because the guild was covering the costs, so she warns him not to choose the cheaper options. About the armor workshop, Quilt asks if he had any places in mind. If he didn't have any preferences, she could recommend her favorite. Apparently, Quilt had the sword made there as well. Quilt informs him that they were rather skilled, but a bit eccentric. Plus, they were handling several high-paying requests. Yuto tries to say that maybe asking them was asking for too much, but Quilt adds that the person had a craftsman's spirit, so if there was a rare material, she thinks they'll bite and easily take it on. Yuto just nods along to her words, but Quilt asks why he was acting so impressed like it was someone else's business. After all, she was sure that he was carrying around a special material of his own. Yuto is confused for a second before his eyes land on Rock. Quilt was referring to the shells of Rock's egg. There was nothing rarer than dragon material. In this case, the eggshell. Yuto asks how she noticed that he had the eggshell. Quilt explains that when they first met, she heard a hard sound coming from Yuto's luggage that was a bit different from metal, and when she saw Rock, she immediately knew what it was. Yuto is amazed at her skills of deduction from just hearing the sound, his praise making Quilt bashful. Placing the eggshell onto the front desk table, Yuto explains that he just packed all the shells he could collect. Quilt observes that it was still sturdy even after time had passed. She says that it was as expected of a dragon egg, praising Rock and making the little dragon puff out a harumph of pride. Quilt says that the workshop was popular, so she'll prepare a letter of introduction to help him make his request smoothly. She wonders if he'll need a map, but decides that he probably won't need one since there were signs all along the way. Once he was close enough, he would be able to spot it easily. Yuto makes sure to ask if it was okay to bring a magical beast into the workshop, and Quilt reassures him that it was fine since they dealt with weapons and armor for magical beasts too. Quilt makes sure to remind Rock not to fight any of the other magical beasts in the shop, to which Rock agrees. Yuto bids Quilt goodbye as he and Rock head for the workshop. Pretty soon they arrive in a large establishment called Kobo's Workshop. The place had all kinds of weapons lining up the walls, headwear and armor put up on display. Yuto marvels at how big the workshop was. When he gets to the front, the woman at the front desk asks his purpose for visiting and if he had a letter of introduction. Handing over the letter from Quilt, Yuto states that he was there for armor creation. The lady tells him to take a number and wait by the sitting area. He had just sat down when his number was immediately called, much to the annoyance of the others around him. Another woman working at the workshop leads him down corridors and into another room. When he enters, another person is already there. He introduces himself as Kobo Lebkuchen and informs Yuto that he's read the introduction letter carefully. Yuto was expecting a master craftsman to be an even older man. I know Kobo looks like a woman, but Yuto refers to him as a man, so that's what we're doing, I guess. When Kobo heard it was Quilt's introduction, he wondered what kind of person Yuto would be. Suddenly, he leans impossibly closer to Yuto. Regarding him with great interest, Kobo laughs and calls Yuto cute, adding that Quilt was finally keeping a so-called young sparrow around. Hey, keep the personal space sacred, please. Yuto immediately takes multiple steps back, denying Kobo's words and defending himself and Quilt that she had just hired him after he was fired. So there was no such relationship between them. Kobo nods in mock understanding, even as Yuto continues to deny it. Kobo jokes that if he wasn't so busy, he'd keep a man too, but he found work the most fun. Suddenly, Kobo gets serious and tells Yuto that even with an introduction letter, he couldn't prioritize him, so he just had to patiently wait until his turn came. Yuto is confused since Quilt had said that there wouldn't be a problem. Before Kobo could leave, Yuto calls out to him and asks if the material was mentioned in the introduction letter. Kobo freezes. Yuto explains that Quilt had told him that Kobo would listen if he had a rare material with him. Starting to piece things together, Kobo admits that he thought it was strange for Quilt to send an introduction letter, thinking that Yuto must just have been a favorite. He orders for Yuto to show him the material, and then he'd decide if it was something he wanted to work with. They move to a sitting area, Yuto placing Rock's eggshells on the table. Kobo picks up a piece and determines that it was an eggshell from a magical beast, the pattern similar to a rock lizard or a rock bird, but still neither. Yuto is internally amazed at Kobo's deductions in an instant. Finally, Kobo gives up and asks what kind of egg it was. Yuto plainly states that it was a dragon egg. Kobo pauses, wondering if he heard wrong before asking him to repeat himself. Yuto repeats that it was a dragon egg. Frowning at him, Kobo tells him that he had some nerve coming there to tell such a bold-faced lie. Yuto is about to defend himself when Rock pops out from Yuto's backpack. Yuto greets the dragon, but he doesn't notice Kobo flinching. Yuto, deciding that if Kobo sees Rock, he would surely believe him, takes Rock from his backpack and holds him securely in his hands. He tries to introduce Rock, but is immediately cut off. Kobo shrieks back in fear at the sight of a magical beast, jumping to the very end of the sofa just to be as far away as possible. A shivering Kobo tells Yuto that he was terrified of live magical beasts. Yuto is confused since he made equipment for magical beasts. Kobo explains that the staff did the measurements and he would just confirm it from afar, and that was how he always did it. Holding up Rock, Yuto asks Kobo to confirm from a distance that it was definitely a dragon and the shell was real. Kobo shrieks again, asking Yuto not to bring Rock any closer. Hiding behind the sofa, Kobo asks if showing Rock was payback for teasing Yuto earlier. He lightly threatens Rock to stay away. Yuto says that Rock was a child that understands and adds that he wouldn't let Rock come any closer to Kobo. From his place behind the sofa, Kobo observes Rock's scales and wings, noting that those features were definitely dragon-like. He says that he's never seen a young one before. Yuto asks him if Kobo finally believes him. With a sigh, Kobo sighs and surrenders, admitting that he was curious about the shell the moment he saw it. With a crazed glint in his eyes, Kobo is amazed that it was undoubtedly the real thing, and even at that moment, he was itching to touch it. Yuto is more amazed at how devoted Kobo was to his work. Yuto asks about the request again, and this time Kobo replies that he would make it right away. When Yuto thanks him excitedly, Rock makes an excited chirp, and Kobo wails for it to not cry out. Yuto reassures him that he was holding on to Rock properly, and Kobo all but begs him to please do so. Going back to the egg, Kobo says that at a glance, maintaining the egg's strength while processing it, he was rather sure he couldn't make a full body armor. Yuto's surprised he could already tell that much. Kobo reasons that since they couldn't use it for the whole body, they would make armor to protect the necessary parts. He recommends a helm and a chest plate, to which Yuto agrees with the plans. Kobo asks what kind of design he wanted since he would be able to accommodate some requests. When Yuto answers, his voice is wobbly and comes out as a mumble, so Kobo asks him to repeat himself. In a louder voice and with a red face, he asks to have a cool design. Kobo laughs at his boyish nature before promising to make some cool armor that would suit him. Yuto thanks him. As for the delivery time, Kobo informs him that it would most likely take around a week. Given the material, it'll need some time to create. Yuto readily replies that it was all fine and for Kobo to proceed at his own pace. Suddenly, with a dark grin, Kobo says that he'll send the bill over to Quilt. Since she wasn't one to waste money, Kobo said she would have plenty, and so he was going to milk her for all she was worth. Solemnly, Yuto apologizes to Quilt in his thoughts. With that, the request was settled. Kobo tells him to look forward to the forward product. Rock chirps out in delight and Kobo lets out a small shriek. He promises to make good use of Rock's shell, so he asks Rock to not get too rowdy. Kobo tells Yuto that they were going to take his measurements, and then he would be able to go home. Yuto is surprised to suddenly find a staff member beside him, but he agrees nonetheless. Later on, as they walk down the streets, Yuto is just thinking about reporting to Quilt that he was able to place the order when his stomach lets out a loud growl. Holding his stomach, he realizes that he hadn't had any to eat since that morning. Rock pops out of his backpack and remakes the same sound of his stomach, which makes Yuto flustered. Continuing to walk, he decides that he needs to find something to eat. Suddenly, he slams his face into the window near him, which appeared to be the inside to a bakery. He starts to drool. It was the bakery he always wanted to visit. Until then, he could only look because he didn't have any money. But now he had some extra in his pocket. Yuto tells Rock that he was going into the store and asks him if he could stay still until he finished shopping. Time passes and Yuto bites into a loaf of bread. His eyes sparkle at the delicious meal. It was completely different from cheap bread. He asks if Rock thought it was good too. The little dragon was seated inside his backpack, happily munching away at his own bread. In a paper bag beside them, Yuto had also saved enough for Quilt. As they walk back to the guild, Yuto tells Rock that they were going to eat their fill more and more from then on. Finally, they get back to the guild and announce their arrival. Quilt swiftly sits back up and welcomes them back. She was definitely not asleep on the front desk again. Yes, of course not. Quilt asks how his request went, and he informs her that he was able to place the order, though he was a little scared about the bill. Quilt reassures him that she would pay for it, so there was no need to worry about it. Yuto remembers the bread they had bought for lunch, and he hands over the paper bag for Quilt. She thanks him for the bread, but suddenly asks if he was free the next day. Quilt had a request she wanted to entrust to him. Apparently it was a survey of some ruins, but she would explain the details the next day. Yuto agrees, and he and Rock make their way back to their room. Quilt watches them go with a soft smile. From then on, he was going to keep on getting stronger. Yuto would face even more painful and sad experiences than what he had already gone through. But he and Rock, who managed to defeat even a giant troll by working together, Quilt believed they could overcome any difficulty. A carriage rides through the countryside. Inside, Yuto yawns sleepily. He couldn't believe that he was still that sleepy that early in the morning mood. I too would be sleepy that early in the morning. He thinks back on how he ended up on that carriage. Quilt tells him that Altatum Ruins was a mysterious place where an unknown ancient civilization sleeps. There were many structures that couldn't be destroyed with current technology, and the magical beasts living there are tough, making them perfect for materials. Yuto asks her if they were going there to gather materials, to which Quilt confirms. Quilt also informs him that the client was Kobo's workshop. Apparently, when Kobo gets inspired, he uses up materials all at once, and that was when they get those urgent requests. Yuto says that it was only expected of a craftsman. Quilt says that it was more dangerous than Furushukasu Forest, but it was regularly managed, so it should be fine if he didn't let his guard down. Quilt asks him if he could be able to go as soon as possible, and Yuto and Rock agree. Smiling, Yuto thought that if it was a place where ancient artifacts slept, then he was already looking forward to it. My bro is just hungry for adventure after they starved him for 2 years. So proud of him. Yuto's thoughts are brought back to the present when yelling rushes by their carriage. A large man steering a black carriage shouts for them to move out of the way as soon as possible. The other carriage blasts by the passenger carriage Yuto was riding. Inside their carriage, 2 adventurers talk among themselves, wondering what happened just now. A male says it was a horse with magical beast blood. Seeing how dangerous it was, they wonder whose private carriage that was. Frozen, Yuto wonders for a moment if he really saw Black Thunder's carriage. He hopes that surely they won't run into them again. Oh, you just jinxed yourself. Meanwhile, the black carriage from earlier finally stops. A man with a bird's head crosses his arms and huffs out a breath. He says that as always, the carriage pulled by the magical beasts wannabe is both the worst and the best experience at the same time. The bird-like man was Black Thunder's executive, El Rocco Tortura, also known as the Black Giant. He looks and sounds like a wrestler. A woman climbs out of the Black Thunder carriage. She clicks her tongue, saying that this was the reason she didn't want to ride in a carriage with El Rocco. With tired eyes and a frown, she says that it was seriously the worst. She was a Black Thunder executive as well, known as Marisha Swindle. Marisha turns to one of the men near the carriage and screams that her cigar had gone out, asking if they were even managing the ride properly. The young man panics and quickly apologizes. El Rocco changes the subject, asking why they needed 2 executives for such a simple job, pointing out that Marisha would be more than enough. Marisha reasons that they've talked about it many times already and that the request was an important matter. After all, it was a job commissioned directly by the country. El Rocco asks what it was. Blowing through another cigarette, Marisha says that the job was an executive class. I guess they mean it's a B class or level mission. It also meant that 2 B-rank adventures were required, and they couldn't go against the country's wishes. That was why they were there in that crappy carriage. El Rocco asks why the country wanted executives to participate in such a boring job as a regular survey. Marisha mourns that El Rocco already forgot everything they talked about. She brushes her thoughts away, saying that it was fine and she didn't expect much from an idiot from the start. She sounds like quite the fun character to be around, LOL. She goes over their mission once more. The country considered Altatum Ruins to be a very dangerous place because it was a gathering place for high magical elements flowing through the earth. High magical elements were pure and vast magic power existing in nature. Though invisible and intangible, it has a definite flow like a river, and this flow is spread throughout the kingdom's land. Just like a river's flow can stagnate and form a lake, there are places where high magical elements accumulate without flowing. This perfectly matches the location of the Altatum Ruins. Some scholars even claim that ancient civilizations were built targeting these accumulation sites. High magical elements were a good energy source for powering magical tools. However, excessive accumulation of high magical elements promotes the growth of magical beasts. It increases the possibility of sudden mutations that threaten humans. That was why the country views Altatum as dangerous. Once a week, they would check the high magical element extraction machines installed in various parts of the ruins, and if the loaded magic batteries are full, they would bring it back with them. Then they load the empty batteries they bought and defeat the required number of magical beasts. El Rocco stays quiet for a moment before letting out an exclamation, but it was clear to Marisha that he doesn't get it at all. Marisha then says it wasn't a difficult job. They just change the batteries and defeat magical beasts. In simple terms, that was all there was to it. They got stable rewards and evaluations for it. It was an easy job. Marisha then turns to the line of trees leading up the woods where another girl leaned at a trunk, hunched over as she threw up. Marisha asks her if she was listening properly. The other girl was Shul, Hayes' lover. Girl is going through the ringer being in this guild, huh? She groaned as she threw up, muttering about the reckless driving and threatening to remember the offense against her. Marisha sarcastically says that she was being scary before taunting Shul and asking her if she was going to tattle to Hayes. She then says Shul looked dirty, ordering her to hurry up and wipe her mouth. Shul hesitantly stands up straight, although wobbling from the effort. As she adjusts her hold onto her backpack, a heavy load weighs on her back as Marisha adds more. Marisha smiles as she leaves the group's luggage with Shul. Shul immediately turns to Marisha asking what she was doing, but Marisha plainly replies that she was only doing what Shul always made Yuto do as a baggage carrier, and if she had any complaints, Shul should tell Hayes who fired him. Damn, she got you there actually. Shul can only frown and quietly click her tongue in response. Oh, even Shul knows she got caught. Whoops! Their group starts to move forward towards their mission. Marisha in the lead and El Rocco and the other men beside her. Shul staggers to follow after them with the heavy luggage on her back. Marisha laughs to herself as she talks in a voice loud enough for Shul to hear. Regular surveys required more luggage than usual equipment, so it was really helpful for them to have the least useful person with them. Blowing another puff of smoke from her cigarette, Marisha tells Shul that if she broke anything inside, then she would have to compensate them. Shul keeps her eyes on the ground as she nods, sweat beading her face. She continues to trudge behind them as Marisha leads the group further in, saying that she wanted to get things over with before the sun sets. Shul wobbles as she walks, internally complaining that the pack was heavy and that she never should have come along. The thought of Yuto suddenly comes to mind. Remembering how she would always go around carrying such heavy luggage, you know your situation's bad when you start comparing notes to the guy who got kicked out. Shul slows to a stop. When she looks up, she exclaims to find herself completely alone. She yells, asking where everyone went. Her face goes pale as she wonders what she should do since she didn't have a map and she didn't remember the way back. Shul screams into the open area, asking if the group was just hiding somewhere and saying that they didn't have to go that far just because they didn't like her. Oof, that last one actually hurt to hear. Shul couldn't hear their voices, but she could sense their presence, so they were most likely nearby. She bites her bottom lip, clicking her tongue. She shouts again, this time more determined. If that was how the others were going to be, then she would manage on her own, and she warns them about when they all get back to the guild. From atop a cliff with the perfect view of Shul, Marisha and El Rocco watch her. Marisha smiles and hums to herself, saying that she thought Shul would start crying, but she actually had some guts. They had left her alone, but it didn't look like she was going to die out there. El Rocco frowns softly, pushing Marisha that they should forgive Shul already, adding that if they don't hurry, it'll get dark soon. Marisha laughs lightly, commenting that he was taking Shul's side. She adds that El Rocco was weak to pretty faces after all. El Rocco flinches but says that she was right that men were weak to women with good looks, tight waists, and big chests and backsides. Ah hell, here we go again. Marisha sarcastically apologizes for having a body that didn't apply to El Rocco's descriptions. She's truly a gem of her own, I love her. He immediately yells that he didn't mind her body type and any decent woman would do, brother, we call that desperation. Marisha clicks her tongue and calls him a monkey. Changing subjects, Marisha offers for them to split into two groups. El Rocco and the others would go to the back. El Rocco and his group immediately start running for the southern direction, saying that stronger magical beasts came out from that side so he was going to be able to stretch his legs. When they're completely gone, Marisha mutters to herself that it was tiring to act with him. But Marisha guessed that she really couldn't criticize other people's tastes. Her eyes go back to Shul. When the pride of an arrogant woman like Shul was shattered, Marisha thought seeing her become docile was unbearably exciting. Oh, she rolls like that, huh? If Shul becomes obedient too, then Marisha doesn't mind keeping her by her side. She tosses her cigarette away and stands up. She figured it was about time and that she had done enough to scare Shul into behaving a bit. Suddenly, a sound catches her attention. The guild members quickly hide behind the line of trees. Magic beasts were already making an appearance. But then they noticed the paws of the monsters drawing near. A pride of lion-like monsters with horns on their heads appeared, looking for prey. Marisha observes that they were alter Leos. The monsters usually only moved in pairs, but the current pride had 5 or 6 of them. When the Leos pass by, the guild members ask her what they planned on doing. Marisha tells them that they were getting out of there. If they faced a pride that many, they might end up dead. Internally, Marisha apologizes to Shul as they had to use her as the decoy. Casting one final glance at Shul, Marisha says out loud for her not to take it personally since Shul was the one who insisted on coming, in the first place. Back below the cliff, Shul takes a tentative step back. The pride of Leos were quickly surrounding her. She squeals in fear at the sight of them. She wonders what a pack was doing right there. The Leos growl at her and she falls to her knees. Even with 3 executive-class fighters, they would barely be able to defeat them, so there was no way she could handle them on her own. Shul cries out, not wanting to die yet. As she yells, a small creature yells as well. The creature throws itself at the Leo closest to Shul, sending it flying. Shul watches, wide-eyed and confused. Another Leo comes in to charge at her, but someone arrives just in time. The Leo leaps into the air to attack Shul, but at the right moment Yuto appears before her and slices it clean in half, cutting its head off. Yuto breathes out a sigh of relief as the Leo disintegrates. Yuto realizes he turned the monster to dust again, commenting that his sword was surprisingly inconvenient at times. Shul stares up at him, slowly realizing who he was. Shul exclaims, finally recognizing Yuto. Not turning around, Yuto asks Rock to protect Shul. Taking on a battle stance, Yuto says that it was time for him to properly prepare Rock's meal. He's a pet owner first before an adventurer. Another Leo leaps up for an attack, powerfully roaring. Angling his sword, Yuto cuts across it again completely. The Leo's body immediately starts to turn to dust. Yuto winces. As he thought, he still couldn't control it well. He wonders if he was unconsciously tensing up due to fear. He needed to master it as Quilt had taught him. Back then, Quilt had led him to an open area, telling him that he needed to start training right away. Quilt says that as his senior with the sword, there were things she needed to teach him. She asks him if he had any experience with swords. Yuto explains that he didn't have anyone to teach him, so he only practiced on his own. Hayes, when I catch you. When I catch you, Hayes, I swear. Quilt understands his situation and decides to teach him the basics. For now, he only had to watch her movements. They turn to wooden planks standing a distance away from them. Quilt closes her eyes, holding up the sword in front of her and focusing. Suddenly, she makes a series of attacks that sends blades of air slicing across the open area. She stops and sheathes the sword back. Turning to Yuto with a smile, she asks him what he thought, much to Yuto's confusion. Suddenly, Rock tries to catch Yuto's attention, pointing to something behind them. When he turns, Yuto finds all the wooden planks standing earlier now cut into pieces. Yuto looks dumbfounded, seeing them all in pieces and confused when that happened. Quilt then asks Yuto what was so amazing about the technique. Yuto thinks hard before saying that it was how the slash flies through the air. Quilt clicks her tongue before saying that he answered wrong. It was amazing in its own right, but that wasn't quite the answer. Yuto is surprised, but Quilt tells him to take a close look at the wooden planks. Rock coos, trying to catch their attention, and Yuto asks him if he figured it out. Rock jumps off Yuto's shoulder and heads to the wooden fence. He coos as he points at the wooden wall. Yuto smiles as he wonders what was wrong with Rock since he was pointing in a completely different direction. But then he suddenly exclaims, understanding his intentions. Quilt asks for the answer and Yuto excitedly says that Rock taught him the answer. The logs were in pieces, but there wasn't a single scratch on the wall. With the amount of force Quilt had used, the wall behind should have been cut too. Rock lets out a proud huff. Yuto, you deadass, let the tiny baby dragon be smarter than you? Quilt claps her hands together as she says that he was right. She tells him that even without using sword skills, it wasn't that difficult to send out a flying slash. Thinking about it now, Yuto was also able to do it too. Yuto looks excited as he thinks of the amazing sword he received. Quilt interjects that along with that, she needed to warn him about something too. The sword carved from a fang, or the dragon fang sword, wonderful name by the way, gave its owner too much power. As the power increased, it also became harder to control. Yuto comments that it was a dangerous thing as much as it was a blessing, and Quilt agrees. Quilt says that she was used to it, so it wasn't a problem anymore for her. But if Yuto carelessly sends out slashes while unfamiliar with it and without even thinking, then it might break through the wall and fly into the neighbor's house. Yuto's face darkens at the idea of people being in the way if that happened. A dragon's power works by a dragon's logic. Dragons, being the strongest magical beasts, are free-spirited and unrestrained because of their strength. But that doesn't work in human society. Yuto had to learn to control his power, or it could lead to a crime. Quilt wanted him to work hard on controlling it too. Yuto turns to Rock at the thought of suppressing a dragon's power. Now that he thought about it, he's never seen Rock break anything despite his strength. Even when he was eating bread, Rock grasped it skillfully. Yuto wonders if he was unconsciously controlling his strength. Yuto ponders out loud that maybe it was time for him to learn from Rock, making the dragon turn to him. Quilt laughs as she kneels down to smile at Rock. She says that learning how to use dragon power from a dragon was probably the best. She asks Rock if she should learn from him too, which makes the dragon coo happily. Quilt stands up, patting her clothes clean. She told Yuto what she wanted to convey, but she wanted to give him one more piece of advice. When swinging the Dragon Fang sword, he should have a clear purpose. If he swings the sword with vague feelings, power will leak out and cut unnecessary things. She tells him to keep that in mind. Yuto ecstatically says that he would engrave it in his heart. Quilt praises him and then tells him that they should start training. Back in the present, Yuto fixes his fighting position. If he was afraid, he won't be able to fire a slash at the Leos. Rock opens his mouth and lets out a breath of flames. The Leo closest to Yuto is hit point blank, making it roar in pain. Yuto thanks Rock as he swings back his sword. He tells himself to focus once more before delivering a fierce slash. The Leo's remains drop dead on the floor. Yuto stares in shock, surprised that it didn't turn to dust. He's thinking about defeating two more when Shul's voice yells to watch out for something behind him. He turns just in time to counter a Leo's claws. Another Leo comes from his side. But before Yuto could turn, Rock barreled into the side of the Leo. Yuto swings at the Leo closest to him to force it to step back. The Leos continue to encircle them. Yuto and Rock face them down. Yuto thanks Rock for saving him. The Leos were attacking two at once now. Rock takes a stance beside Yuto, prepared to attack as well. They rush towards the remaining two Leos. The monsters roar as they approach. Rock leaps into the air and opens his mouth to deliver a blast of flames right into the enemies. Yuto slides in before slashing at them immediately, slicing at their necks. The remains of the Leos fall to the floor. Shul watches as Rock leaps up towards Yuto. She couldn't believe her eyes that they were able to defeat them all. Yuto and Rock share a high five, obligatory victory high five with the homie after slicing through multiple lions. Nothing special about that, lol. Meanwhile, Yuto and Rock laugh and smile at each other for a job well done. Yuto says that since 4 of the Leos were still intact, Rock could eat the meat, making the dragon coo happily. Yuto suddenly turns around and heads over to Shul. He holds out a hand for her to help her stand and asks if she was alright. Shul stares up at him dazed before she realizes what she was doing. She clenches her fists and looks down at the ground. She hesitantly asks why Yuto saved her when she's done such horrible things to him. Yuto says that her past treatment of him doesn't give him a reason to help her, but it also didn't give him a reason to ignore her. Shul stares up at him in tears. Internally, Yuto thinks that he probably would have helped Hayes too if he was being attacked. This boy is an angel, OMG? To him, ignoring someone out of hatred would only lead to painful feelings later. He helped because the bad aftertaste came without any satisfaction from seeing her suffer. Shul takes his hand as she stands up. She says that Yuto was such a good-natured person. Yuto lightly laughs, saying that that wasn't really what he was trying to do. But he cuts himself off as he remembers to ask where the other members were. Shul flinches. Yuto says that surely she wasn't reckless enough to come there alone and that there must have been a few others nearby. Yuto is confused when he sees her start to shake. Angrily, Shul yells that the others had left her behind. Yes, Queen, go off on them. They had made her carry all the luggage and it was too heavy to keep up with them, and then she cut herself off. With a shaky voice and still in tears, she says that she had also made Yuto do the same thing. She said she didn't have a choice, but as she does so, she suddenly starts to whine and apologize to Yuto. Yuto starts to panic and tells her not to cry. Shul sniffles as she says that although it was too late, she truly was sorry for being cruel to him. Yuto smiles. He tells her that since she understood that, he wanted her to be kind to others from then on. This boy is one step away from entering the gates of heaven as an angel. Yuto says that he would let bygones be bygones for what she did to him. Shul starts to argue with him, but Yuto cuts her off. He says that he's already turned over a new leaf and he's working at a different guild now. He was actually enjoying his current environment, so they should put the matter to rest. He kindly offers her a handkerchief. Shul starts to wail again, saying that Yuto shouldn't be comforting someone who treated him badly before calling him an idiot. She thanks him for the handkerchief anyway. Yuto exclaims at her words in shock, confused on what to do. Yuto then says that Black Thunder hasn't changed at all. He thought that Hayes would reflect on their recent failure, but it seems like they haven't learned their lesson at all. Rock angrily coos at his words. Suddenly, Shul calls out to him hesitantly. She says that she wasn't very strong in combat, and she wasn't sure if she could make it back alive if she was left alone in a place like that. Shul suddenly rushes up to him, so close that they were chest to chest. Yuto's face explodes into a deep shade of red. "R.I.P. Yuto, you will be missed." Shul begs him in a rush not to leave her alone and that she would do anything. In a frenzy, she says that she would even lick his shoes, his sweat, and anywhere else. "Girl, OMG, calm down. I know you're desperate, but let's not get that desperate." Yuto tells her to stop over and over. He tells her to calm down for a moment, and Shul does. She looks down and fists her skirt, her hands trembling. She shakily admits that she was scared of going through something like that again. Yuto holds onto her shoulders and says that it would be okay because he wasn't going to abandon her. Shul asks again and Yuto reassures her that yes, she would come with them. A beautiful smile graces Shul's face as she tearfully thanks Yuto. Yuto is struck silent for a moment. Shul used to have a much scarier image for him, but when she was honest, Yuto thought she was surprisingly approachable. Yuto tells her that they still had a job to do, so he asks if it was okay to finish that first. Shul happily agrees. Ever since Yuto had left the guild, unbelievable things kept happening to him. He couldn't believe that he would be talking to Shul like he was. He thought that if she always made a face like that, she probably wouldn't face so much resentment from others. Yuto watches for a moment as Shul happily laughs to herself that she could go home. Yuto then tells her that she looks much cuter when she was like that all the time. Look at bro being all smooth now. Shul's face bursts into red. It was super effective. Shul screams at him, asking what he was doing flirting with someone who had a partner. Not gonna lie, I forgot that she and Hayes were an actual item, whoops. Yuto is confused, defending himself that wasn't his intention at all. Rock coos in disappointment. In another part of the ruins, El Rocco looks at the battery seriously. He hums to himself, saying that it didn't need to be replaced. Behind him, one of the guildmen is amazed at the high magical element extraction machine. El Rocco says that the place was apparently built by analyzing ancient technology, so the barrier was there to prevent magical beasts from destroying the device. One of the men notices that the battery wasn't very full and asks if that was normal, as he thinks back to Marisha's words. Similar to how rivers had times with more or less water, it was the same with high magical elements. There were periods when the flow was less. El Rocco turns to the guildman and explains the same thing. He adds that he should feel free to ask him for anything. El Rocco asks his men if they should move on to the next point. The guildman is confused because he thought there were supposed to be 3 more extraction machines. El Rocco asks if it was the guildman's first time on the regular survey, and he confirms it. El Rocco explains how the extraction machines were interconnected. When the high magical elements in one machine are full, they flow into other machines. So if there was space in the batteries, the rest of the extraction machines must be empty. The guildman understands, but the manual said to check all the extraction machines? They should have made this guy the guildmaster at this point, since everyone else is useless from the looks of it. El Rocco throws an arm over the guildman's shoulders and says that he understands how he feels. But if they checked all the interconnected extraction machines, it would get dark soon before they finished. Are they afraid of the night or something? Why are they so worried about it getting dark soon? He says that today they encountered more magical beasts than usual and were already behind schedule. He asks the guildman if her wanted to take any longer than necessary. The guildman hesitantly agrees with what El Rocco was implying. El Rocco tells him that it was good to know when to cut corners since it was part of the job too. That's also how people die on the job. They came here every week for surveys and the previous team must have checked thoroughly. The extraction machines shouldn't break in just a week and that sturdy barrier is protecting them after all. Eventually, the guildman is convinced, saying that El Rocco was right and they didn't have much time. So maybe they should move on to the next point. El Rocco tells him that there were many extraction machines scattered around. They start to run again as El Rocco leads the group, saying that they need to get work done quickly. The other guild members agree with him as they follow. However, there was indeed an error in El Rocco's explanation. Of course there was. He skipped an inspection for dangerous materials. The groups of interconnected extraction machines throughout the ruins didn't store high magical elements in a specific order. When one extraction machine becomes overfilled, it releases the excess to other devices. In other words, there was no rule to the order in which high magical elements accumulate. However, for the past few months, they've only been accumulating in one machine per group. As a result, El Rocco and the others have gotten into the habit of only checking specific extraction machines. Black Thunder is just a guild of useless people, huh? But just as a river's shape can change, the flow of high magical elements can shift without warning. About a month ago, high magical elements began flowing near the 3 extraction machines they had stopped checking. The batteries installed in those 3 were already full. The high magical elements El Rocco and the others checked were just the overflow. If they had been checking all the extraction machines regularly, they would have easily noticed the change. However, due to Black Thunder's members' sloppy management, that's all you need to know really. They've been missing this anomaly for a month. Now an unprecedented amount of high magical elements is accumulating in the Altatum ruins. Even if they notice now, it would be too late. Somewhere amidst the mountain range, something rumbles. Birds quickly fly overhead at the tremors. El Rocco and his group stare up at multiple odd rock formations as they pass by. The guildman exclaims that there were a lot of statues that were scattered there. El Rocco asks if he meant the magic steel soldiers. Oh, that's definitely a pleasant name. He says that they weren't just statues, they were dangerous weapons that move using magical elements as energy. However, that was a long time ago. Of course it was. Now they're just moss covered and don't move, so they don't need to worry. El Rocco yells out encouragingly for the group to finish quickly so they could enjoy some women and booze. Please don't tell me that's the reason he's so worried it's going to be too late. Unbeknownst to them, one of the steel statue's eyes light up. On Marisha's side of the ruins, she declares that the check was complete. They hadn't seen any monsters since the altar Leos from earlier, so they should get out of there quickly. One of the guild members hesitantly comes forward and asks if Marisha thought Shul was safe. Marisha puffs out smoke from her cigarette as she remembers. She says that if Shul was lucky, she was probably still alive. In this world, it was all about luck. Living or dying was just a chance. However, they did make her carry all the luggage, so they didn't have any food, Marisha, pretty sure that was all you. They needed to finish the job quickly and head back. Meanwhile, on their side, Yuto looks down at a map. He reads that from there, the habitat of the rare metal crab near the water source was the closest. He turns back around and calls Shul over. Suddenly, she tells him to wait. Yuto asks what was wrong, but that just makes her more confused. Yuto was somehow carrying all her luggage. Yuto blinks in surprise, realizing what she just said. He exclaims that she was right and it had become a habit for him. Shul is slightly bothered by his words. Yuto says that since it was already like that, then he should keep carrying it. We love a gentleman. But Shul argues with him, saying that it would be too much. Yuto reasons that in their current situation, it was more efficient for him to carry it since he was used to it rather than Shul being handicapped by the luggage. Considering their survival rate this way, it increased her chances. Shul begrudgingly admits that she couldn't argue with that, but it felt unfair to him if she wasn't doing anything. Seeing her face, Yuto then offers the luggage to her, making sure to inform her that it would get heavier as they collected more loot. Shul excitedly tells him to leave it to her. Rock coos in delight. Yuto comments on it, saying that the dragon seems to be in a good mood since they arrived in the ruins. Shul is amazed that it was true that Yuto had a dragon with him. She had heard Hayes mention it. Yuto says yes, and that it hatched from the egg they retrieved together. Shul softly repeats his words to herself before realizing what he said. She explodes at the realization that the rock lizard egg they saw hatched a dragon. Yuto calmly says that she was correct, although they still didn't know why the egg was in such a place. Shul says it was no wonder she felt something was off about the egg's pattern back then. I can't believe she's saying this after Yuto got his ass kicked for saying he thought the patterns were all off. Yuto comments that she was surprisingly knowledgeable, and Shul admits that she liked rare magical beasts, so she knew a bit about them. She says that the eccentric nobleman and Hayes really did something stupid. If they had investigated more carefully, they might have become dragon parents. Yuto agrees, but because of that, he was able to meet Rock, so he was grateful more than anything. Rock coos in delight. Shul kneels down closer to Rock. With a welcoming smile, she opens her arms and tries to call him to her. Shul waits expectantly, but suddenly Rock turns his head away from her. Oh girl, you're getting shots all throughout this day. Shul's face drops as Rock ignores her call. Yuto stares down at Rock in shock. Seeing the way Rock was acting, it was like its usual friendliness was all a lie. Shul shakily gets up. Suddenly she yells that she couldn't believe it. She had never been ignored by men, women, animals, or magical beasts before. That's quite the flex there, sis. She has tears in her eyes out of frustration. In that case, she was using something else. She looks around in her pockets and produces an object. She inches closer to Rock again, tempting him with high-quality dried meat. Rock starts to drool at the sight of the meat. Shul says that if he came closer to her, then she would let him eat it. Hearing her words, Rock turns away his head again. Shul exclaims that it didn't work either. She starts to mope on the floor, saying that she really wasn't attractive. Yuto turns to Rock, who was still looking away from Shul. He found it so unusual. He had never acted like that with people he's met before. They just met Shul today, so Rock shouldn't know her. Yuto wonders if it could be that Rock remembers what was happening when it was still an egg. Yuto didn't know the truth, but even if Rock doesn't warm up to her, he properly protected Shul during the battle, so Rock probably won't harm her on his own. Time passes and Yuto sighs out in relief. They were mostly done there. Shul is amazed that he could fight while carrying luggage. Yuto says that he was used to carrying bags, so it wasn't much of a difference. Now that he was remembering it, Yuto also noticed that she brought a lot of luggage around too. He asked what was inside her pack. Shul hesitantly admits that it was art supplies for drawing rare magical beasts when she found them. Yuto is surprised to know that she was able to draw. She tells him that her father, who passed away a few years ago, was a magical beast scholar. He traveled around drawing magical beasts to create a bestiary. Her dream was to continue his work and keep drawing for the bestiary. But it wasn't going well. She apologizes again for making him carry useless luggage all that time. Shul sighs softly with a sad look in her eyes. Yuto blinks at her for a moment. He tells her that he didn't think it was useless even if it couldn't be used well. He admits that he found it more comforting to think that he was carrying someone's dream. Oh yeah, this boy is definitely an angel or something. Of course, he tells her that he thinks she should try to carry only as much as she can handle herself. Shul softly mutters how kind of a person Yuto really was. Yuto turns around to ask if she said anything, but she brushes his words away, saying it was nothing. They were about to move when Yuto suddenly noticed something. It was a barrier in one of the batteries. Yuto asks if it was supposed to be the high magical element extraction machine Quilt mentioned. Shiul says that it should be. She tells him that they were supposed to replace its battery. She didn't know the details since they were forced into it. Yuto remembers Quilt saying that the flashing of the extraction machine was a sign that it was full. In that case, high magical elements might be overflowing into the surroundings, so he should be careful. Yuto says that he was getting a bad feeling about it. Shul tries to reassure him that they came to replace it so they shouldn't be a problem, but their conversation is cut short at the sound of a large boom. All of them freeze as they see smoke coming from deeper into the woods. Yuto says that they should go check it out. Shul had a bad feeling about this, but they had no choice. They run deeper into the woods until they see a massive crater surrounded by debris and a body of a monster. Yuto notices that the corpse was an alter Leo. Shul mentions that given it was a particularly large, mature specimen, it was most likely a king alter Leo. They figured that the pride that attacked Shul earlier was moving in a pack because there was a king alter Leo. Looking down at the large crater, they thought that the smoke from earlier might have come from it. They wonder if Leo was killed in an explosion. A place where such explosions occur would normally be off limits. Suddenly, Rock starts to coo at them. Yuto comes closer to ask what he saw. Rock leads him to one of the surrounding debris. Yuto frowns as he finds himself looking at what seems to be a humanoid golem's hand. Smoke was coming from its core. Yuto turns back to the body of the King Alter Leo and wonders if it was shot by the golem, given the large hole that cut clean through its body. The debris surrounding the crater were all golem remains, and Yuto wonders if the golems broke apart from the recoil of their own attacks. He couldn't make sense of what was going on. Suddenly, Shul calls out to him. She nervously suggests for them to leave. She didn't understand what was going on, but it seemed dangerous. Yuto agrees, not thinking that the situation was good at all. He tells her that they should retreat and ask for judgment from someone in a higher position, but just as he does so, he's cut off once more. Another explosion rings out deeper into the woods and they turn to its direction. More smoke pours out from the line of trees above. Yuto asks if that was the sound of fighting. Shiul says that they didn't see any other parties there, so it was possible. Yuto comments that the sound was too close to them. They eventually arrive at a clearing to find a group of adventurers fighting a golem. Yuto sees El Rocco and Marisha worn down from fighting. As they draw closer, the golem raises its hand. The core on its palm is starting to glow. Yuto panics that it was about to fire. He calls out to Rock and immediately the dragon springs into action. Rock leaps into the air. Rock barrels right for the golem's side, making it tilt at an angle and aiming its arm away from the wounded adventurers. After that, Rock flies over it and delivers a burst of flames from its mouth. Yuto yells that he would be assisting as their group draws closer to Black Thunder's party. Marisha is surprised to see both him and Shul. Yuto kept things brief as they didn't have time. He tells them that the extraction machine near them was full and it might be related to the current situation. Marisha pauses, hearing him say the machine was full, and tells him not to joke around. Yuto says that it was true, proving it by saying that the lights were flashing on the machine, the sign of a full battery. Marisha exclaims at the realization that the forest was currently overflowing with high magical elements. Yuto says that he would hold the golem off there. He asks Marisha and the others to do something about the full extraction machine since they couldn't just leave it as it was. Marisha says that certain idiots might have been slacking off. Your idiots. It was your idiots, Black Thunder's idiots. She agrees with his plan and they would go check the extraction machine. As the Black Thunder party turns to leave, Marisha tells him to watch out for himself too. Yuto agrees. As Yuto watches the group leave, behind him, the golem from earlier gets back up and reaches down towards one of the fallen golems. It takes one of the golem's arms. It reattaches it to itself and prepares to shoot. Now with both arms turning to face it, Yuto is amazed to know that the golems could share parts even when damaged. Yuto knew it was too much work for just Rock and him to handle. He's wondering what he should do when his thoughts are interrupted. A voice tells him that they were going to help. He's surprised to find Shul behind him, cracking her knuckles. Yuto exclaims that he thought she went with the other party. Shul is angry, saying that she was already abandoned by them and she'd rather fight alongside him than be with them. Her eyes are determined. Oh, she really is queen status. Yuto says that he couldn't take responsibility for whatever happened, but Shul argues back that it was fine because she can use some magic too. Shul runs past one side of the golem while Yuto and Rock run the other side, confusing the golem. The monster turns its head towards Yuto and aims at him. Yuto winces, finding it difficult to get close and attack. Behind the golem, Shul suddenly starts to taunt the golem. Raising her hands, Shul casts a spell called Kugeldan Nur Purple, Lightning Bullet. Her attack hits the golem square in its back. A part of the golem's body is burnt and Shul smiles, victorious that she was able to hit it. She turns around to run, calling out to Yuto for them to escape since she's already distracted its attention. Yuto finds the opportunity to use the opening to get closer. Suddenly, Rock rears his head back before delivering a large ball of fire. It hits the golem and has it kneeling from the damage. Yuto thanks Rock as he charges in for the finishing blow. He swings his blade at the golem, but only a harsh sound echoes, not even a dent on its body. The force sends tremors rushing through Yuto's body and has him gnashing his teeth. The situation was bad, the sword wouldn't go through. Shul yells for him to watch out and dodge, but it is too late. The golem draws one of its arms back and hits Yuto square in the side of his body. Bro just got hit by a solid wall of stone and steel. Oof. He grunts out in pain, but he doesn't let go of the sword. Shul yells Yuto's name. Yuto is grunting in pain, trying to focus on battle. He had misjudged. Controlled power wasn't going to work on the golem. It was even stronger than the giant troll. Yuto needed more power. The golem was slowly trying to get up, despite Yuto's sword trying to pin it down. Yuto needed power even stronger than before. The mark on the back of his hand and the blade of his sword started to glow fiercely. He yells as he forces the sword to cut through the golem. The sword blade seems to shine as it passes through, and the golem falls. It tries a last-ditch effort to get up before inevitably falling flat back into its face. Yuto wobbles in place, breathing hard, rather amazed that he was able to defeat the golem. Suddenly, he doubles over in pain as he feels the full force of the hit from his side. Shul and Rock rush up to him in a panic. Yuto grits his teeth in pain at his condition. Shul starts to fuss over him in a panic, not sure what to do. She wasn't sure if she should lay him down at a time like this or better to keep him sitting up. She suddenly remembers the luggage they were carrying, sure that there would be something in it that could help them. She finds what she was looking for and brings out a potion bottle. She pops it open and immediately jabs it into Yuto's mouth, forcing him to swallow the contents. Almost immediately, Yuto's body glows as the potion takes effect. When the light subsides, he exclaims that he was already healed. Rock coos happily. Yuto slightly panics that a high-grade potion was just used on him. He asks if it was okay to use something like that on him. A bit too late for that now, bro. Shul scoffs and says that since they abandoned her, they can't complain if she uses their potions as they pleased. Yuto says that they still had quite a few potions left, and since more magical beasts or golems like earlier might appear, so they should use them then if needed. Shul happily agrees and says that they should use them generously, but Yuto says not to use them too generously. Time passes and Hayes and two other guild members beside him sit stiffly in front of a woman in uniform. She sips her tea quietly, and when she raises her eyes, she stares sharply at them and requests for their report. I don't know who she is yet, but I love her design. In the Black Thunder headquarters, Hayes grits his teeth in panic as he thinks of what to answer to the woman. He was annoyed that of all the people, it had to be her. Always calm and cool-headed, no amount of bribery could ever sway her. Bribery really is this guy's way of solving things, OMG. If it isn't money, then it's getting physical. The woman was Serena Stalin, also known as the Implicit Serena. Just as she takes a sip of her tea, Serena suddenly stops. Hayes tries to appeal to her good graces and nervously asks if the tea was not to Serena's liking. Serena lowers her teacup and asks if Hayes didn't feel a rather unpleasant and unsettling tremor happen just then. Hayes admits that he hadn't. The only thing he feels is his bruised ego. Serena leaves her seat and opens a window. Hayes nervously asks what she was doing. Looking out of the window, she says that she was feeling the wind. Suddenly, Serena exclaims that she felt the tremors again. She ponders out loud that the direction the tremors were coming from were headed to Altatum. While the other guild members remain confused, Hayes is standing up, uneasy the more Serena speaks. She suddenly turns away and declares that the audit was temporarily suspended. Hayes exclaims before he asks in a panic if she was planning on heading off to Altatum ruins, which Serena confirms. Internally, Hayes realizes that their situation was bad since the ruin site was managed by their guild. If there were any problems, their guild's reputation would surely plummet. Honestly surprised that there's any reputation for Hayes to salvage anyway, after all the things Black Thunder got into. Hayes tries to suggest that he would go with Serena since Black Thunder's survey team was out in the Altatum ruins right then, so they needed to respond immediately. But Serena brushes him off as she leaves the room, plainly saying that it wouldn't be necessary. Damn, Serena, get his ass! Hayes shouts after her, but Serena ignores him. Hayes shouts at his guildmen to prepare their horses immediately since they were heading to Altatum too. At the same time, Quilt suddenly sits up with a snap, knocked out of her sleep. She scratches the back of her head as she gets her thoughts in order. What a mood, truly. Looking out the window, she mutters to herself that she felt an unpleasant tremor. Judging by the direction, she figures it was coming from Altatum. She wonders if going after Yuto and Rock would make her seem overprotective, but she also thinks how they were comrades she's finally met. Coming to a decision, she grabs her sword. With one last lingering look out the window, she wishes Yuto and Rock to stay safe. Back in the Altatum ruins, sounds of battle echo in the open area. Yuto, Rock, and Shul stand before a steel soldier holding a shield and a sword. The golem raises its sword into the air. At that moment, Yuto and Rock rush in. Rock distracts the golem, and taking the chance while its eyes aren't on him, Yuto delivers a swing that cuts it in half. Yuto mutters to himself, thankful that the golem had a weapon on it that actually helped their situation. Shiul calls out to him and informs Yuto that El Rocco and the others were coming back their way. Yuto turns to her, saying that they should regroup with El Rocco and his party and report back to the royal capital. But he stops. El Rocco and the rest of Black Thunder were running out of the forest, but behind them 3 steel soldiers followed close behind. Yuto flinches at the sight, exasperated that there were still so many golems left. Suddenly, a voice rings out telling them to stop right where they were. Behind El Rocco and the others, they watch as vines suddenly spurt from the ground and entangle all 3 of the steel soldiers. The golems completely stop moving as they're immobilized before the vines squeeze and the golems crash to the ground in pieces. Yuto is dumbfounded at the scene that just happened. A woman on horseback suddenly comes towards them, a whip in hand. Serena introduces herself as a member of the Grand Guild. By her authority, she informs them that she would be speaking to everyone present. Looking around the area, she comes to the conclusion that the activated magic steel soldiers were the fault of the Black Thunder Guild. Oh, they're not coming back from this. Oof. She asks the members if she was wrong, but El Rocco, Marisha, and the rest of the survey party pointedly look away and refuse to say anything. Serena gets off her horse and says that in their current situation, silence was tantamount to agreement, but she'll still have to confirm the details. She asks them if that was all right, and one of the party members hesitantly agrees. Serena fixes her glasses and says that since it was still dangerous in their area, they would have to move. Yuto stares speechless at the exchange while Shiul looks away, whistling, pretending she doesn't know anything. Same. I would have too. But technically she really is out of the loop. Since El Rocco and the others have returned, they must have done the exchange. With Serena there, who defeated the golems in an instant, Yuto and the rest could probably relax from then on. Suddenly their moment is disrupted when a man on horseback arrives demanding to know what happened. Yuto is surprised to see Hayes. Serena calmly asks if Hayes ended up following them. Hayes nervously defends himself that he couldn't just sit still since his comrades might be in terrible danger. That is quite the bold-faced lie. Internally, Yuto mutters that Hayes was only acting all concerned when he was probably only worried about the evaluation. Serena fixes her glasses as she says that Hayes' arrival might just make things go faster. Oh boy, here we go. Terrains that easily accumulate high magical elements flowing through the earth were scattered around the world, and Altatum was one of them. The accumulated high magical elements give power to magical beasts, causing mutations and new evolutions. Serena asks if everyone knew that much information. Hayes and Marisha can only frown as they're given the talk. The extraction machines were created to nip the dangerous buds while still ahead and utilize them instead. Behind Serena, another golem approaches her. The others look on in surprise, but Serena doesn't turn around. She tells them that managing and operating the machines were a crucial duty just as the golem raises its arm to fire. Serena tells them that the responsibility of such a duty was immense. The others start to back away as the golem nears, but Serena cracks her whip on the ground. She tells them that cutting corners was not allowed. In an instant, the golem behind her is entangled in vines, and in the next second it crumbles to pieces as the vines squeeze. Serena doesn't even flinch. She's so awesome, OMG. She says that it was especially so in Altatum ruins. The ruins were so old that no one knew when they were built, their devices with technology they still couldn't decipher, and with magic steel soldiers clearly made only for battle. All of the things she mentioned used high magical elements as their power source. If that land became filled with high magical elements, there was a risk that ancient threats could be revived. Yuto blinks, amazed once more at Serena's instant win against the golem. Serena fixes her glasses again as she continues, oh, she's really ripping into them. She tells them that the country, wishing to maintain the order of things, had delegated management to upper-level guilds like them, and yet it resulted in the current situation where magic steel soldiers were activating one after another. The situation could have been avoided if the extraction machines had been properly checked. El Rocco and Marisha look down guiltily. Serena looks down at the clipboard in her hands. While the regular survey reports seemed fine at first glance, the amount of high magical elements stored in the batteries has been unusually low recently. Serena says that they would need to check each extraction machine's logs and clarify the actual state of the surveys. She says that they most likely checked only the extraction machines where high magical elements easily accumulate, returned quickly, and without noticing the change in the flow of high magical elements, left them unattended until the batteries exceeded their capacity. Looking back at the group, Serena says that that was probably the kind of sloppy management they were doing. Oh damn, she has you where she wants you. No going back now. Hayes clenches his shaking hands, his breathing hard. In a last-ditch effort, he tries to tell Serena that it was all a simple mistake and they just happened to overlook it during the checking process. Marisha suddenly places a hand on his shoulder and tells him there was no more room for excuses. She plainly states that the batteries actually became full, and they're still being chased by magic steel soldiers unable to exchange them. Truly the voice of reason. Hayes whips his head around and yells at her, but Serena cuts in. She says that since he was trying to cover up what the logs would reveal, it was clear that he's been concealing facts with false reports. Moreover, there have been complaints about Black Thunder for some time now. Hayes grits his teeth but stays quiet. Serena admits that they were conducting interviews with the royal capital residents and past clients, but given the current situation, she doubts the results would differ from their expectations. With that, Serena had determined that Black Thunder was no longer worthy of being an upper-level guild. Oof. There it is. Hayes falls to his knees, stuttering out a response. Serena says that it wasn't that their guild was completely incompetent. It was just that in their pursuit of wealth and fame, they took on more requests than they could handle. Sis, I can tell you right now, it is more than just them taking too many requests. Serena tells Hayes that from then on, Black Thunder would restart the organization management at a scale that suits them. Hayes remains quiet. From behind him, Yuto watches their exchange. Black Thunder had completely fallen from grace. Yuto was worried about what Hayes might do in his current state. That's definitely something to be careful about. Suddenly, Rock coos loudly, trying to catch his attention. Yuto turns to him and asks if the long talk got too boring for him. Hey bro, watch out. I'm pretty sure you're within Serena's listening distance. But Rock coos out in alarm. Yuto calls out to Rock, but suddenly the ground behind him starts to tremble. The earth breaks open from beneath and eyes suddenly emerge from the ground. Yuto, Shul, and Rock watch as a magic steel soldier crawls its way up, its size bigger than the rest. Behind them, Serena prepares her whip. She wonders if it could be a complete form and says that things had turned into the worst-case scenario. The large golem stands before them, eyes glowing and with 4 large arms ready.